Chapter 35 The Hero Faction, Tatsu. Ne. Mi. Ushi. Tori. Saru. Inu. Saru. Tori. Uma. Tora. Ihitsuji. Saru. Yusaru. Tatsu. Tatsu. Ne. Mi. Ushi. Tori. Saru. Inu. Saru. Tori. Uma. Tora. Ihitsuji. Saru. Yusaru. Tatsu. Deep within the seal that kept Kurama from escaping into the world, Naruto and his giant, orange-furred partner were sitting together and practicing hand seals. Naruto had crossed his legs while he worked. Kurama couldn't cross his legs. His body was physically incapable of such a feat, so he sat with his legs hunched and used his human-like hands to create the same hand seals Naruto was making. Uma. Saru. Tori. Inu. Tora. Ihitsuji. Iuma. Uma. Saru. Tori. Inu. Tora. Ihitsuji. Iuma. The goal of this exercise was to practice synchronizing their hand seals so they could perform the new jutsu Naruto had created. It was a long and involved process. The jutsu required them to complete 365 hand seals. This normally wouldn't be a problem, outside of the fact that making 365 hand seals was impractical during a fight. Naruto could easily do this. The problem was that he and Kurama had to be in perfect sync. Their hand seals couldn't even be a second off. It couldn't even be 0.005 seconds off. Tatsu. Mi. Tori. Mi. Saru. Tori. Uma. Tatsu. Mi. Tori. Mi. Saru. Tori. Uma. This was their 60th time practicing these same hand seals, though they were not using chakra to cast any jutsu. The technique they were practicing seals for was dangerous. If they made even a single wrong move, all the chakra inside of their bodies would explode, not only taking out them, but also destroying more than half of Japan. Time within the seal moved differently than time outside of it. An hour in here was only a minute outside. This meant Naruto and Kurama could practice to their heart's content. I think we've just about got it, Naruto said as they finished all 365 hand seals again. Ha! The loud gust of breath hit Naruto's back, blowing his hair every which way. This is a lot harder than I thought it would be. I think my fingers are cramping. Mine too, which is weird because this isn't even my real body. Maybe I have mental cramps? Enough with the jokes. Heaving another hefty sigh, Kurama placed his hands in front of himself and used them as a pillow for his chin. Naruto followed his example and used Kurama's paws as a backrest. Your fur is so soft and fluffy. HMPH. Unlike you hairless monkeys, I have a lustrous coat of well-groomed fur. I won't deny that. I feel like I'm sinking into a cloud. The two of them remained like this for a while, just trading banter as they relaxed, but all good things eventually came to an end. Are you really sure this is going to work, Naruto? I wouldn't have created this jutsu if I didn't think it would work. Naruto's answer seemed to satisfy Kurama, who offered a single nod. While he would have liked to stick around, Naruto did have a school trip to attend to, and so he closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and then opened them again. He was back in the real world. It was early in the morning, early enough that the sky was just beginning to shine with light from the sun. Naruto was sitting cross-legged by a corner. Behind him was a large fence. Before him was a large, flat roof with only a few power boxes and a door leading to a staircase that would take him back to the lobby. He wasn't alone. 4 other people were outside with him. Issei and Asia were practicing against each other. Asia was firing magic at Issei, who ran, swerved, and jumped to avoid being struck. If he had to guess, Naruto would say that Asia was trying to further develop her reflexes for releasing magical power at close range, while Issei was trying to increase his ability to react and dodge close-range attacks. Several meters from Asia and Issei was Kiba and Irina, who were sparring with a pair of wooden swords. Kiba was flitting around Irina, using his superior speed to attack her from every conceivable angle, but that didn't mean Irina was defenseless. She spun around, angling her blade so Kiba's would glance off. Then she countered with a quick slash. Kiba would dodge by leaping back. Then he'd leap right back into the thick of things. Naruto watched the two groups for a little while. The 4 eventually noticed that he was back from his journey into the seal and made a unanimous decision to take a quick break. He could see as they drew closer that all four of them were covered in sweat. His eyes were naturally drawn to Asia and Irina, the two girls in the group. Irina wore a tight pair of black spandex shorts that did nothing hide her magnificent thighs and hips. Likewise, her sports bra only covered her breasts, and there was a notorious gap that revealed a healthy portion of cleavage. Sweat dripped down her toned belly and thighs. Naruto wouldn't lie and say the sight wasn't attractive, though he did his best not to stare for too long. Asia was wearing similar clothes to Irina, but perhaps because he thought of her as a sort of little sister, her appearance seemed more cute than erotic. She just looked too adorable for her own good. "I see you're back," Kiba said as he sat next to Naruto, the others following suit. "How is it? Any luck?" "We've got the hand seals down." Naruto shrugged. "But unfortunately, we won't be able to practice synchronizing our chakra. It's too dangerous." "Do you think it will be ready in time for your rating game?" asked Irina. "You guys are having a rating game against Cyroorg when we return from Kyoto, right?" "Yup." Naruto scratched the back of his head. "I'm pretty sure this will be ready by then, but I don't plan on using it for a rating game." "Why not?" asked Issei. "Because it's too dangerous and too powerful." Pausing, Naruto tilted his head and bit his lip. "This is a technique that will allow me to use the full extent of Kurama's power. However, Kurama is a being whose powers are on par with Ophis herself. That sort of overwhelming advantage would make for an interesting match, don't you think?" While Issei didn't seem to understand, Kiba nodded several times as he realized where Naruto was going with this. Rating games are about more than just displaying your power. It is also about strategy and utilizing your pieces to the best of your abilities. A good portion of the rating game is about the king showing off how well he or she can use the members of their peerage. If you used this kind of power to win each rating game, people would eventually begin to question Rias' ability to win without you. Exactly, Naruto crossed his arms and nodded. They'd say things like, "Well, of course Rias won when she has such a strong piece," or, "Rias only won because her pawn is so powerful. She wouldn't be winning on her own merits anymore," which would lower her overall standing among the devil population. Rating games were ultimately meant to display the competency of a peerage's king. If a king relied on the power of one piece, then that king's abilities would be called into question. Naruto wanted Rias to shine. She couldn't do that if he took away her thunder. Besides, using Kurama's power for what was essentially a game felt an awful lot like cheating to him. "That sounds rough," Irina said. "That's politics for you," Naruto shrugged. Politics sound rough. Naruto couldn't disagree. By the way, he began as he gazed at the two wooden swords Kiba and Irina had in their possession. "Are you two planning to carry those swords everywhere you go?" Kiba and Irina looked at the wooden swords that were currently on their laps. They weren't anything special. Just a pair of wooden swords shaped like katanas. "Well, I was thinking we might need something to defend ourselves with," Irina admitted, however. "Let's do this instead." Kiba extended his hand and created a short sword. Gleaming silver in the light, it was shaped like a European broadsword, but it was only about the size of a longer than average dagger. "Here, you can use this to defend yourself if something happens while we're on the school trip." "Oh, that's a wholly short sword." Irina took the weapon from Kiba. "This will be easy to conceal in my school bag. Thank you." Irina twirled the weapon around in her hand, causing it to become a blur. As he watched Irina skillfully test the weight and balance of the blade, Naruto caught sight of Issei's demotivated expression. He wasn't the only one. Asia saw it first. "Is something wrong, Aiz-san?" And nah. Issei tried to play off his feelings. "Not really. I was just thinking, is it the power of the dragon that's attracting all this trouble? I remember hearing that a dragon's power tends to attract people who are drawn to power." Issei was likely referring to how they had been attacked by those yokai. "I wouldn't worry about that," Naruto said. "If anything, what's happening here is completely unrelated to us. We just happened to arrive at a bad time. Even if you were the cause of all this trouble, it just means you need to be strong enough that you protect everyone." "Yeah, you're right. Thanks, sensei. Anytime." Naruto smiled, but then a sudden surge of mischief ran through his veins, causing his friendly smile to widen into something more fox-like. "Now, how about you and I spar a bit? We still have 30 minutes before breakfast." As Issei's face rapidly paled, Naruto heard a chuckle deep within his mind. Yes, this wasn't for his own amusement. All he wanted to do was help Issei get stronger. Nothing more. Nothing less. Right, Devil Ninja, Sanjusengan-do was a Buddhist temple in the Higashiyama district. To reach it, Naruto, Kiba, Irina, and the rest of their class had to take a bus from the Kyoto station near Kyoto Tower. They could have walked. It was only a 21-minute walk. However, the only ones who wouldn't have had a problem walking there were Naruto, Kiba, Irina, and some of the students who were in sports clubs. No one else wanted to walk. The entrance to the temple was marked by a parking lot. The temple itself was longer than it was wide, and it possessed the slanted roof typical of traditional Japanese architecture. Walls made of wood gave the structure an ancient feel. Naruto heard that the temple was created in 1164 under the orders of Emperor Go-Shirakawa, so the old feeling of the building made all too much sense. "Man, would you look at this place?" Naruto muttered with a whistle. "It looks so decrepit." "Oh, don't be rude, Naruto." Irina elbowed his side. "Of course it's gonna look a bit, dilapidated. This place is old. The government does a great job of refurbishing this place so it still retains its original appearance, but that doesn't mean they're going to make it look brand new. I guess." Still, Naruto gazed at the building and sighed. "It doesn't change the fact that it looks old." "Oh, whatever," Irina said with a smile. "Come on, you two," Kiba said with a gesture. "Everyone is heading inside." "Coming," Irina said as she followed Kiba. Naruto was about to follow them as well, but then he paused as a slight shiver ran down his spine. It felt like someone was staring at him. He turned around and looked at where he felt the source, but there was no one there. No, that wasn't quite right. Someone had been there, but they weren't there now. "Naruto," Irina called out to him. "You coming?" "I'm coming." Shrugging, Naruto ran to catch up with Irina and Kiba. He hadn't felt any hostile intent in that gaze, so he was sure everything was fine. Entering the temple with the other students, the first thing Naruto noticed were the 1,000 golden statues standing on the left and right sides of the main statue, which was larger than the others. Situated in 10 rows and 50 columns, the 1,000 statues were covered in gold leaf. They looked like women clasping their hands in prayer. Well, 2 of their hands. These women had 42 arms that Naruto could count. However, he knew from the brochure that these were the 1,000 armed cannon. You had to subtract the 2 regular arms and multiply the arms behind their backs by the 25 planes of existence to get the full 1,000. They also had 11 heads. Naruto thought the statues were weird, but what did he know? On top of the 1,000 armed cannon statues, there were also 28 statues of guardian deities, including the 2 famous statues of Fujin and Raijin. I read somewhere that the 28 guardian deities have their origins in Sanskrit texts of Hinduism, Kiba said as he, Naruto, and Irina walked along and admired the statues. The deities here are Narankango Ou, Mishaku Kongorikishi, Toho Ten, Birarokusha Tenu, Barubakusha Tenu, Bishamonten, Daibin Tenu, Teishaku Ten, Daibenkadoku Ten, Mawara Ou, Jinmo Ten, Kanpira Ou, Manzensha Ou, Hippokara Ou, Gobujiogo Ten, Kanjikikajiku Ou, Sanshitai Sho, Nandaryu Ou, Sakararyu Ou, Karora Ou, Kandaye Ou, Manson Ou, Magorika Ou, Makishira Ou, Kendaba Ou, Ashura Ou, Kanara Ou, and Basusenin. That's a lot of really long names to remember, Naruto muttered. The deities can trace their origins to Indian Dharmic mythology and correspond to Varuna, Vishnu, Lakshmi, Brahma, Shiva, Garuda, Vayu, Narayana, Indra, and a number of other powerful Hindu gods. It sounds like these Hindu gods have a good deal of influence in Japan, Naruto said. I hear the Hindu gods are some of the most powerful around, Irina said. A number of Asian religions came from Hinduism, and a large number of people within these countries believe in the Hindu gods more than any other. I wonder if we'll ever get to meet them, Naruto wondered out loud. Probably not, Kiba said. They tend to keep to themselves, I hear. Since they weren't allowed to take pictures inside of the temple, Naruto had to wait until they were back outside to take any pictures. He made sure to get pictures of himself, Kiba, and Irina standing in front of the temple, and then sent them to Rias. Knowing her, she'd want to know how their trip was going. He also made sure to send some selfies. After visiting Sanjusenan-do, the group moved on to several other temples within the area, including Yojenin and Hojuji Temple. Naruto took several more pictures to send of each temple. However, while sending them, he kept getting this feeling like there were several eyes on him. None of the eyes felt hostile. What's more, he couldn't see anyone who looked suspicious. Still, it was annoying to be watched by people he couldn't find. It stung his pride as a ninja to know there were people out there who could hide from him. Jerks. How dare they prove better at hiding than he was. After several hours of walking from temple to temple, the class went to grab some lunch. Everyone was tired. Several people complained about how their feet hurt. The place where they chose to eat was a traditional Japanese restaurant with an aquarium built into the counter of the first floor. Since their class consisted of nearly 25 students, they were given a place on the second floor, which was meant to hold large and small banquets. Naruto and Irina were forced to sit apart from Kiba. The poor boy found himself surrounded by girls the moment he sat down, and the two of them were pushed off to the side. Kiba-kun, what are you thinking of having? I hear their tempura is really good. We can share if you want. Back off, sister, he's sharing with me. Kiba's as popular as ever, Irina muttered with sweat dripping down the side of her face. That's a prince for you. Naruto shrugged. Irina glanced at him. Are you not jealous of him? Why would I be? Asked Naruto, tilting his head. I'm dating Rias Gremory, often considered the most beautiful girl in school. I'm also dating Kaneko Taju and Revel Phoenix, both of whom are considered incredible beauties. I hear Revel has reached the same level of popularity with the freshmen that Rias has. He wasn't sure what to think of that. Proud, annoyed, protective, call him possessive, but he didn't like it when other people ogled them. I guess you make a good point. Besides, Naruto added with a shrug, none of those girls can even hold a candle to you. When Irina's face burst into color, Naruto wondered if maybe he shouldn't have said that, but then he thought about it. Wasn't now the perfect time to talk about the elephant in the closet? Irina, do you love eyes? What? Irina blinked, then blushed a bit. No, well, sort of. It's a bit complicated. Why do you ask? Back when I first met you, I noticed that you would often look at eyes when you thought no one else was looking. Irina's cheeks burned at his comment, but he continued. However, you never did anything about it. I assumed you decided not to act on your feelings because he's dating Asia. I think he was also dating Akano at the time, but I could be mistaken. In any case, I assumed you had decided not to do anything because you are Christian and believe in monogamy. But lately, you haven't really been paying as much attention to eyes as you used to. Irina's cheeks retained their pink coloration as she looked away. It was pretty cute. That said, Naruto wondered if maybe he was being a bit too blunt. He probably could have asked that question more delicately, but he'd never been what he would call the delicate type. It is a bit complicated. I actually did like Aiz-kun for a long time. Irina spoke slowly, carefully, as if each word was something precious. Back when we were little, he and I would always play together, and I had a really big crush on him, though it seems he thought I was a boy this whole time. A slightly bitter smile rose to her face. But you were right. I did love Aiz-kun. Even after learning that he'd been reincarnated as a devil and had become a pervert, I still loved him. Did something change? That's where things get a bit complicated, Irina admitted. I do still have feelings for Aiz-kun, but they aren't as strong as they used to be. I think a part of it is because Aiz is dating Asia. They seem so close. They're holding hands or hugging every time I see them, and well, I know they are doing that in private. Judging from the way the redness was spreading from her face to her ears, that likely referred to sex. Naruto knew Asia and Issei were physically intimate. Akano had introduced the two of them to the joys of sex back when she had been a part of their relationship. It was only natural the two would continue after Akano broke things off with them. And you felt uncomfortable about trying to get between them? Naruto guessed. Something like that, Irina admitted with a shrug. It's just as you said. I'm Christian. In Christianity, we believe in monogamy. One man and one woman get married till death do they part. The idea of trying to enter into a relationship with Aiz-kun and Asia never really occurred to me, and so I just, sort of gave up, I guess. Naruto nodded several times. Had he been in her shoes, he probably wouldn't have been as bothered. While there were plenty of monogamous relationships back in the elemental nations, polyamory was a legitimate practice.
Many men and women had their own harems. Also, Naruto himself was currently in a relationship with 3 women. No, he supposed it was 4. He had gone on that date with Office, though they hadn't done anything beyond the date. Also, Irina began, her face turning an even darker shade of red.
Also, Naruto asked when she trailed off, prodding her to continue. However, Irina did not continue. Her cheeks burned so fiercely Naruto thought they might catch fire. She wasn't looking at him anymore, but down at her lap, though she would glance at him from between her parted hair every so often. Naruto felt his heart beat a little bit faster as he wondered if they were about to get to the heart of what he really wanted to talk about. The relationship between them. He'd known about her feelings for Issei. That was why he'd kept their relationship cordial and friendly. He teased her a bit, but he never went beyond that because it wouldn't be right. However, if she no longer had her heart set on Issei, then maybe. Majiwariao sen de tuku yobi kakeru sora, juji no shita de mao senritsu no koa. Just before he could finish his thought, Naruto's phone began ringing. It was the ringtone he used for when Kaneko was calling him. Yowasa nado kimi ni misataku naikara, kaze wo yukade furidat susumi.
Ah, I'm sorry, Irina. Would you mind? He held up the ringing phone.
Mastering her blush, Irina smiled and shook her head, her twin tails swaying from side to side.
Not at all. Go ahead. Thanks. Tapping on the accept call button, Naruto placed the smartphone against his ear. Kaneko, what's up?
Naruto, is everything okay over there? He blinked. Of course, why wouldn't it be? While he didn't let anything leak into his voice, Naruto wondered if Kaneko had somehow found out about the yokai attack yesterday. He didn't think so. If she knew, then it meant Rias would also know, and if Rias knew, then she would have called him the moment she learned about it. At the same time, he couldn't help but feel a trickle of worry worm its way into his gut. Well, it's not serious, I guess. It's just that Rias showed me those photos you sent. Was something wrong with the photos? I don't know. In the background of several of those photos, I saw a number of fox yokai. That isn't very rare. I mean, they live all over Kyoto, so I'm not surprised to see them, but it looked like they were all staring at you. Naruto frowned as he realized he hadn't noticed any fox yokai while wandering around Kyoto that morning. However, he had felt eyes on him. Could those eyes he felt have been the fox yokai? Kurama? Am I under an illusion? I cannot sense anything, but it is possible they're using a means to fool your sight that I cannot detect. We are in a different world, after all. Nodding, Naruto spoke into the phone. I don't think there is anything to worry about, but if something comes up, I'll call you. I appreciate that. Does Rias know? Of course. She was going to call you herself, but I called first. That explained why Kaneko was telling him this and not Rias. After saying goodbye to Kaneko, Naruto hung up and put the phone back into his pocket. He looked at Irina and smiled. Sorry about that, Irina. It looks like Kaneko saw something. Would you mind if we continued talking about? Naruto trailed off when he noticed Irina's pale face. He wondered what had caused her to look so worried, but then he looked around and realized that, aside from him, Irina, and Kiba, all of the other students were fast asleep. Slumped in their seats, they were leaning over the tables, snoring away. That was unusual in and of itself. However, something else made Naruto realize how unnatural this situation was. The waitress who was now standing before their table was not human. At first glance, she appeared to be nothing more than a Japanese woman of above-average looks. Her dark hair was long and lustrous. Her milky face was covered in makeup. She wore a pink kimono with cherry blossoms on it, complemented by the red obi around her waist. However, after a second glance, Naruto easily noticed the 2 fox ears twitching on her head. She also had a pair of tails, which he could see poking out of her kimono. Naruto remained calm. If this woman wanted to kill them, she wouldn't have stood there, waiting for him to notice her. Good afternoon. The woman bowed. I am a fox yokai who serves Yasaka-sama. I have come here at the behest of our Hime-sama to fetch you. She would like to apologize for her behavior the other day. Kiba was glancing at the woman with narrowed eyes. While Irina looked pale, Naruto could see that her hand had dug into her school bag. He didn't doubt she was gripping the holy short sword. I understand. Naruto took charge of the situation. Please guide us to where your Hime-sama is. Of course. The fox yokai bowed again. Come. I shall lead you to the inner capital where we Kyoto yokai live. The Mao and the fallen angel governor are already there waiting for you and the others." Naruto assumed the others was Issei and Asia. As he stood to his feet, Irina and Kiba relaxed their tense stances and followed suit. They walked down the stairs and out of the restaurant. No one seemed to even notice them as they passed. It was like they were ghosts. "These Kyoto yokai sure are something," Naruto thought. Kurama mumbled in agreement. Devil ninja. Naruto couldn't quite figure out how they had gotten to their destination, and if asked, he would only be able to shrug. All they had done was walk through a secluded torii gate. Part of him wondered if this was like a yokai spacetime ninjutsu. In either event, the place where he, Kiba, and Irina were led to could only be described as another world. A world separated from the one he knew.
Ancient houses lined either side of a small road made of dirt. There was no black top to be found in this place. The houses themselves did not just look old, they actually were old. He could tell from the general shape these structures were in that they had been built hundreds of years ago. All of them reminded him of paintings he'd seen depicting old houses from the Edo period.
They were not the only ones present. Issei, Asia, and Roswise showed up at around the same time he, Irina, and Kiba did.
As they followed the fox yokai, Naruto looked up at the many buildings on either side of them, or, more specifically, he looked at the creatures staring at them from the windows. There were all manner of residents, a single-eyed yokai with a large face, kappa-like creatures with dishes on their heads. Naruto even snorted when he saw a tanuki and thought of Gaara. There were all manner of strange yokai.
All of them were staring at him and the others with unbridled curiosity. The area was rather dark. Naruto didn't have a problem seeing, but he wondered why it was so dark. Their only source of light was a lantern that moved along the road in front of them. As Naruto stared at the lantern, it spun around and revealed that it had eyes and a mouth. Woo-sha-sha-sha-sha, crack. Everyone stopped walking when Naruto suddenly decked the lantern in the face. He blinked, looked at the others, then down at his fist, still outstretched in the general position of a straight jab. He slowly retracted his fist and rubbed the back of his head. "Sorry." Reflex. The fox yokai who'd been guiding them sighed. "You have my sincere apology. The yokai here love to play pranks." "Oh, no worries." Naruto gave the woman his most dazzling foxy smile. "Pranks are like my bread and butter. In fact, I should teach this lantern guy how to play a proper prank that won't end with his face being on the receiving end of my fist." For reasons Naruto couldn't understand, everyone who heard him talk suddenly shuddered. "I think we should keep you away from all the yokai here," Kiba said seriously as Issei and Irina nodded along with him. "Wah! How could you say that? Easily." Naruto pretended to cry. Unfortunately, his tears didn't seem to affect anyone. Kiba, Issei, Irina, and even Roswise looked indifferent. It was a good thing Asia was there. There. The cute blonde girl rubbed his back. "Don't feel sad, I like your pranks." "Thank you, Asia." Naruto smiled and ruffled the girl's hair like an affectionate older brother. "I'm so glad I decided to adopt you as my little sister. You're a great imouto." Hee. Asia blushed and squirmed underneath his large hand, but she seemed pleased by his words. The group continued on. Naruto studied the sights a bit more, but he eventually grew bored. All of the buildings looked fairly similar. It probably didn't help that the elemental nations had buildings that looked a lot like this. Unlike everyone else here, who were no doubt used to modern Japan, he knew of a world that blended this sort of architecture with more modern structures. "So, this is the world of the yokai?" Issei asked as they walked. He, at least, seemed rather fascinated.
The fox yokai nodded. "Yes. This is the place where most Kyoto yokai live. I have heard that you devils use bounded fields in raiding games. If you want to, think of this space as something created in a similar manner. We call this place the backstreets, or the inner capital. Of course, just like devils, there are those who live out there on the surface of Kyoto."
Hearing more about how this place was created made Naruto realize it was more than a simple space-time ninjutsu. This space was more like a barrier ninjutsu that distorted space. He probably could have likened it to a pocket dimension or something similar, only on a massive scale like the bounded fields used in raiding games. While walking, a number of yokai on the street glanced their way and began talking. "Are those humans? No, I heard they're devils." "Devils, It's pretty rare to see them here." Don't think it's ever happened before. Is that pretty foreign girl a devil too? I sense the presence of a dragon. So devils and dragons, huh? What about that one with the whiskers? He must be a fox yokai of some kind, right? While listening to the yokai talk, Naruto became curious and wandered closer to the woman guiding them. I'm guessing it's rare for devils to visit the inner capital? In point of fact, no devil has ever visited the inner capital before today, the woman informed him, her fox ears twitching. That said, it was going to happen eventually. We have been holding discussions with Sarafal-sama for a little while now. Had our leader not gone missing, we would have invited her here at some point. Naruto nodded and fell back a bit. It seemed discussions had been in the works for longer than he had realized. Ever since the three factions formed an alliance, they had begun trying to build bridges with other factions. Currently, Naruto knew they were in talks with the Greek pantheon and the Shinto pantheon. He didn't know if they were trying to broker peace with anyone else. After passing through what he supposed was a residential area, they found themselves entering a forest with a large river flowing through it. He took a breath of air and almost smiled. The air here smelled unnaturally pure. It vaguely reminded him of home, which made him feel slightly homesick. Before long, Naruto and the others found themselves standing before a massive red torii connected to a huge mansion. It was another ancient structure. A traditional Japanese building surrounded by a wall that could only be accessed through the massive torii gate. The structure reminded him of the ancient palaces he'd seen in photos. Actually, their class was planning to visit one of those mansions today. At the front of the torii were Azazel and Sarafal, both wearing a kimono. Azazel's was in muted colors of gray and brown, which gave him a very plain appearance when compared to his beautiful companion, Sarafal, whose brightly colored kimono was dabbled with shades of pink and red. Naruto. Sarafal waved at him with a cheerful grin. Hello everyone. You've finally arrived, Azazel said with something of a lax expression. Of course, he almost always wore an expression like that. As Naruto raised his hand to wave back, he paused upon spotting a person standing between the two. He had almost missed her because she was so short, even when compared to Sarafal, who barely reached his chest. It was the blonde girl who had led the attack on them yesterday. Wasn't her name Kuno? She wasn't wearing her priestess outfit like last time, now dressed in a light kimono with a multicolored hue. The girl looked like a princess from the Warring States era. Or maybe even a princess from that video game he and Rias played sometimes. What was it called? Dynasty Warriors? Something like that. Kuno-sama. The fox yokai bowed before her leader's daughter. I have brought everyone as requested. Thank you. Please go fetch Karasu-sama, as you wish. The fox woman burst into flames and disappeared. Naruto blinked. That was impressive, actually. He wondered if he could learn that trick. It would be so cool to appear and disappear in a burst of flames. Taking a deep breath, the young princess stepped forward. My name is Kuno. I am the daughter of Yasaka, the administrator of the yokai living in Inner and Outer Kyoto. After introducing herself, the girl bowed her head to them. I am terribly sorry for my conduct last time. Attacking you without even investigating into whether or not you were responsible for my mother's disappearance was unforgivable. This girl was very proper. Naruto found himself impressed by her conduct, which had the regality he expected from someone many times her age. Wait, just how old was she anyway? It was always hard to tell with people who weren't human since they lived so long. For all he knew, she could be 100 years old. Well, whatever. Since no one else was speaking up, Naruto walked over and placed a hand on Kuno's head. The girl's ears stiffened. He wondered if she was remember his admittedly out-of-line head petting the previous day, but Naruto ignored that thought and gently rubbed her head. Don't worry about it. I think I understand where you're coming from. If my mom had disappeared suddenly one day, and then a group of devils came to Kyoto, I would probably jump to conclusions too. Besides, this misunderstanding was cleared up, right? I don't think we should worry about what happened the other day. Kuno tilted her head to look at him, her large eyes peering at his face from underneath his hand. She really was a tiny thing. His words seemed to break the ice. Irina stepped forward and placed a hand over her heart. I feel the same way. Compassion and forgiveness is a fundamental precept for us angels. I don't have any grudge toward you. Yes. Asia clasped her hands together. I believe it's more important to seek peace with the yokai, so we shouldn't fight. I'm with Asia on this. Issei scratched his neck. Kiba chuckled. Of course you are. I don't think I need to say anything, since everything worth saying has already been said. Despite their words of reassurance, Kuno looked resistant. But I. Still grinning, Naruto lowered himself so he was eye level with Kuno. The girl stared at him with those big eyes of hers. They were very innocent and pure, making him realize that even if she acted mature, she was still just a kid. A child who was worried about her missing mother. He rubbed her hair some more. Kuno's cheeks flushed, but she wasn't resisting, so he assumed it was okay. You must really love your mother a lot. Oh, of course I do. Jumping to conclusions when you are so worried is natural. It's true that you caused us some problems, but no one here blames you, and you've already apologized. You don't have to worry about it anymore. Even if you say that, so this girl wasn't going to let what happened go so easily, in that case. Then how about this? Naruto offered his suggestion. I would like someone to guide me around Kyoto. Since your mother is in charge, you probably know this city well. Would you mind showing me around? Like a person drowning at sea, Kuno latched onto the suggestion he'd offered like it was a life raft. Oh, of course. I can definitely show you around. I know everything there is to know about Kyoto. In that case, I'll be counting on you. Naruto stood up, ruffled her hair one last time, and took a step back. Oh, but before that, I want you to know that I don't blame you for what happened back then. I don't want you blaming yourself either. Ah. Kuno looked down at her feet, clad in a pair of tabi socks and Geta sandals. I understand. Thank you.
Naruto nodded, even as he thought about giving himself a pat on the back. He could do it too. Unlike other poor, unfortunate souls who could not create shadow clones to pat themselves on the back, he was perfectly capable and willing to do that.
As he pondered whether or not to actually go through with it, Azazel grinned at him. As expected of the lowly kitsune. You're very good at seducing kids.
What the hell are you talking about now, old man? Asked Naruto, frowning as he raised a single eyebrow.
Nothing. Azazel waved off his words, causing Naruto's frown to deepen. Oh, but speaking of kids, would you and Ice-kun be interested in starting up your own television show? Huh? Naruto and Issei said at the same time. We haven't been able to do anything yet because everyone has been so busy, but we recently learned that you two have become incredibly popular among the children of the underworld, Azazel informed them. A lot of children are calling Issei the Oppai Dragon because he's constantly shouting about Oppai during raiding games, and they call Naruto Whiskers because of those fox-like marks on your face. Sirzex, Michael, and I have been discussing creating a TV show starring you two. Naruto and Issei looked at each other, both wondering what they should do. What do you think? Asked Issei. Well, it does sound kind of interesting. I think we should do it. Being a TV star does sound cool, but that name, Drake, is crying. We can discuss the details later, Azazel said. I just wanted to present the option. HMPH. Seraphal crossed her arms and puffed out her cheeks. Just don't expect to do better than me. Miracle Levi Tan is the most popular show in all of the underworld. After that little deviation from their original conversation was over, the group was ushered into the mansion. Naruto once more found himself impressed. While the floor was made of tiles, there was a red rug that traveled through the center. The walls were a combination of paper walls with traditional Japanese artwork and wooden posts. Likewise, the ceiling was also a combination of wood and paper wall paneling. They soon reached the Great Hall and Kuno took a seat. Naruto and the others sat around her. He sat between Irina and Issei, while Asia sat on Issei's other side and Kiba on Irina's other side. Seraphal and Azazel sat before them. Since this was a political function, they were basically the ones in charge. There were two other people standing on either side of Kuno. One was the fox woman from before. Naruto guessed she was Kuno's attendant. The other was a long-nosed man who looked older than the buildings they had passed on the way to this mansion. He had been introduced as the leader of the Tengu, and he apparently had a deep relationship with the Kyuubi since ancient times. Stress wrinkles around his eyes and forehead told Naruto that he was sincerely worried about Yasaka and Kuno. Her cheeks red with embarrassment, Kuno lowered herself into a bow. While I am very sorry for my mistake, I would like to ask, no, I am begging you. Please lend me your strength to save my mother. A sharp pain made Naruto rub his chest. It was not a physical pain, but he felt it keenly as though it were. We would love to help, Azazel said, taking the role of spokesperson. But we don't know what happened yet. Could you please tell us more about Yasaka's disappearance? Why yes. I will do that. Kuno needed a moment to compose herself, but she soon began talking, telling them about how her mother had left several days ago to meet with Sakura's messenger from Mount Meru. However, she failed to show up at the meeting place. A day passed and several yokai were sent to investigate, where they discovered one of her guards, a Karasu Tengu who had somehow survived. Fatally injured, the Karasu Tengu told the yokai investigating her disappearance that Yasaka had been attacked and kidnapped before dying. It was after this event that they started investigating suspicious individuals. According to Kuno, she had stumbled upon their group by accident and assumed they were the kidnappers. As Azazel and Seraphal spoke with Kuno, Naruto leaned over to Kiba. Hey, who is Sakura? Sakura is the ruler of the Trayastrimsa heaven according to Buddhist cosmology. He also goes by the name, Sakura, Lord of the Devas. The word Sakura means powerful and is used as an epithet for Indra, the ruler and king of the Hindu pantheon, Kiba said. Naruto nodded and began paying more attention to the conversation between Azazel, Seraphal, and Kuno. It looked like it was winding to a close.
I understand why you would be suspicious of a group of angels, devils, and fallen angels entering your territory, but I can assure you that neither the underworld or heaven were involved. Azazel placed a hand on his chest. Given everything we know about her disappearance, it's more than likely Yasaka was kidnapped by members of the Chaos Brigade.
Kuno frowned. I have heard that name before, but only in rumors. The Chaos Brigade are a group of terrorists who are threatening the peace of various pantheons, Azazel explained. There are 3 factions that we know of for certain. The Old Satan faction, the Hero faction, and the Magician faction. Unfortunately, we only really know about the Old Satan faction. We know a little about the Hero faction, but nothing definite, and we haven't heard a peep about the Magician faction. Azazel looked frustrated, which Naruto didn't blame him for. He bit his lip for a moment, then sighed and stood up. I know a bit more about the various factions. Sitting down beside Seraphal, Naruto gazed at Kuno. The Old Satan faction is the largest of the 3. They consist entirely of devils who believe in the old ways. They follow the descendants of the original 4 Satans. I don't believe they were involved with Yasaka's kidnapping. It's not their style. More than likely, the ones involved here are the Hero faction. What can you tell us about this Hero faction? Asked Kuno, leaning forward with an eager look. They're the 2nd largest faction, Naruto stated. Their leader is Cao Cao. I hear he is a descendant of a famous hero who shared his name. All of the faction members are people who have sacred gears, wield holy and demonic swords, or are Longinus wielders. Their top members are Cao Cao, who wields the original Longinus, the spear that was said to have pierced Jesus when he was crucified, Heracles, Jean, Georg, Siegfried, and Leonardo. All of them are descendants of heroes from the past, except for Siegfried, who is a homunculus created through alchemy. How do you know this? Asked Azazel. Because the Hero faction tried to recruit me, Naruto said. I turned their asses down flat. I have no interest in people who want to make trouble for my loved ones. Also, during the time I was imprisoned by the Chaos Brigade, I met several of their members. Cao Cao and I didn't really get along. His words caused not only Kuno, but also the old Tengu and the fox woman to stare at him in shock. They couldn't have known about any of this. Obviously, it wasn't like they'd had much contact until recently. Do you think you could help us locate and save Yasaka-sama? Asked the old Tengu leader. We, of course, will pledge our full cooperation to you. Azazel and Seraphal fell into thought for a moment, but they didn't need to think long. Of course we'll help, Seraphal said. We are trying to forge an alliance here. What kind of allies would we be if we didn't lend a hand? Thank you, the old Tengu said, relieved. Would you mind showing us what Yasaka looks like? Asked Azazel. I've never actually seen her before, so I'm not sure who we're supposed to be looking for. Of course. As the man produced a portrait from somewhere, Naruto, Issei, Irina, Kiba, and Asia crowded around Azazel and Seraphal to get a look at the woman. She was absolutely gorgeous. A blonde-haired beauty wearing a traditional Miko outfit. Naruto imagined Kuno would look like this when she grew up. Oh Oppai! Issei suddenly shouted. Look at the size of those Oppai. While Naruto snorted into his hand, Irina gave Issei an aggrieved look. Of course, she only glanced at him in disapproval. Asia puffed out her cheeks like a dissatisfied squirrel. Ice-kun, size isn't everything. If you want breasts, then look at mine. Ah, I didn't mean your breasts are bad, Asia-chan. I really like them. But you like bigger ones better, don't you? And no, that's not it at all, I like all oppai. Ignoring the byplay between Issei and Asia, Naruto looked at the portrait of Yasaka. Issei was right. This woman's bust was truly massive. Even among the women he knew, only Rias and Akeno could match her in size. That said, he was more interested in the fox ears on her head. Was it wrong that seeing those ears made him want to pet her head? While we can't know where she is right now, we can be certain that the kidnappers are still in Kyoto, Azazel said as he leaned back. What makes you say that? Asked Naruto. The flow of ki in all the regions of Kyoto is stable. Azazel cupped his chin. The nine-tailed fox known as the Kyuubi is responsible for maintaining the balance of ki flowing from the different areas of this land via the ley lines. You can actually consider Kyoto itself to be a large-scale force field. If the Kyuubi ever left this land or was killed, then Kyoto would undergo potentially cataclysmic changes. Since there's no signs of that happening, it means Yasaka is still somewhere in Kyoto and unharmed. Which means the kidnappers are likely still here as well. Naruto nodded as he figured out where Azazel was going with this. Kuno looked relieved to know that her mother was probably unharmed, though it still didn't change the fact that she was in the hands of the Chaos Brigade. Given what he'd learned, Naruto was certain the hero faction intended to use Yasaka's connection to the ley lines and flow of ki for some nefarious purpose. He just didn't know what. I've already mobilized several devils who are familiar with Kyoto to search the city. Serafal added into the conversation. However, we are few in number. I'd like to recommend that several yokai join up with us and help search. Since yokai are able to sense ki more easily than us, you might be able to find clues we're likely to miss. That is a good idea, the Tengu leader said. I'll help you search as well, Naruto said. Once more, he became the center of attention.
I'd rather you guys didn't get involved. Azazel sighed. However, it looks like we don't have the manpower to really refuse. Also, you guys might be the strongest fighters here. Your power is undeniable, and we're going to need that power if we have to fight against the hero faction. However, I want you all to enjoy your trip for now. I'll call upon you should anything happen that requires your power.
Of course. Everyone from the Gremory peerage agreed to Azazel's request readily enough. Kuno placed her palms together and bowed to them once again. The fox yokai and the old Tengu leader also bowed their heads to them. I beg you. Please lend me your power to save my mother. It seemed their conversation had finally overloaded Kuno, or maybe the relief of finally having secured more help was what had done it. Her head was bowed. Naruto couldn't see her face. However, several droplets of water were falling onto the floor. Kuno was in tears. He didn't know if it was relief, worry, stress, or a combination of everything that had happened, but seeing such a young girl in tears made Naruto's heart burn. They call themselves the hero faction, but they are no heroes. As someone who had looked up to and admired many heroes in his life, Naruto took that title seriously. Heroes protected people. Heroes saved people. Heroes ensured the smiles and happiness of others. The hero faction did none of that. They're just a bunch of supremacist pricks. Naruto clenched his hands into fists and quietly promised himself that he would show the hero faction the error of their ways. With his fists, of course. Devil Ninja, Naruto was lying on his bed, his belly full and his mind at ease. Everyone had finished dinner and taken a bath. The dinner had been a buffet-style dinner, and everything had looked so delicious that he'd taken to eating more than he could reasonably fit in his stomach. He'd definitely gone overboard, he would admit it. Are you going to be okay? Asked Kiba. The princely boy was sitting on the other bed, eyeing Naruto's stomach, which looked like it was housing a baby inside of it. Yeah, Naruto patted his belly. I'll be fine. Just give me a second to digest.
This belly would disappear in less than an hour. His body had always been good about digesting food quickly.
Deciding to go for a walk after letting himself relax on the bed, Naruto said a quick goodbye to Kiba and began strolling through the corridor. He soon found himself standing on the same emergency escape where Issei had stripped Roswise. Looking at the city of Kyoto at night, he briefly recalled a conversation he'd had with Rias before leaving on this trip.
I should give her a call. Pulling out his smartphone, Naruto selected Ria's image from the call section and held the phone to his ear. It only rang once before someone picked up.
Naruto? The familiar voice made Naruto's shoulders relax. A smile formed on his face as he recognized Ria's voice on the other end. Yeah, it's me. How are you, Rias? Is everything alright in Kuo? Yes, everything is fine. Nothing really exciting is happening here. That said, I do miss you. I wish you were here with me. I wish I was with you too. Making small talk with Rias was relaxing in ways Naruto couldn't understand. That was probably why he avoided talking about anything too heavy. Once he began telling her about everything that had happened since he had arrived in Kyoto, their conversation wouldn't be able to return to the same light-hearted tone. However, Naruto knew he couldn't put this off forever. So, listen, he began, something's happened here that I feel you should know about.
Explaining what happened took a bit of time. Naruto first had to talk about how he and the others were attacked by Fox Yokai and Tengu, which made Rias nearly flip out and say she was coming to Kyoto. He only just managed to convince her not to head over. After that he went on to explain how Yasaka, the Kyuubian leader of all Kyoto yokai, had gone missing and was presumably kidnapped by the Chaos Brigade. Of course, Naruto made sure to let her know that Azazel and Seraphol were working with the yokai to track down Yasaka's whereabouts.
It sounds like there's a lot going on over there. Are you sure you don't need me come and help? You know I'll do so.
I know, which is why I don't want you to come over here. You leaving Kuo right now could cause problems, and in any case, I think Eyes, Kiba, Asia, Irina, and I can handle this. Besides, we're not alone. Aside from Seraphol and Azazel, we also have Rosweiss.
Speaking of, have you made any progress with Rosweiss? You mean romantically? Yes. No, with everything that's happened, we haven't really had time to talk. I understand. I was just curious. And why are you asking me about my romantic inclinations with Rosweiss? Well, you know, I kind of figured she was interested in you. I thought you might have recognized that. I see. Naruto and Rias spoke for a little longer, but they eventually had to say goodnight. After pocketing the phone, he traveled back to his room, and then stopped in front of the door. Someone is on the other side, of course. His first thought was Kiba, but if it had been his friend, then the hairs on his arms wouldn't be standing on end like this. Someone who wasn't Kiba was inside of his room. What did that mean? Were they here to attack? Were they lying in wait to ambush him the moment he walked in? Naruto frowned. He was trying to get a sense of who they were, but he wasn't good at recognizing people by their presence alone. He heard light thumping from the other side. It was getting louder. They were coming closer to the door. Naruto held his breath and waited until the last possible second before slamming the door open and leaping in. Iya! A startled scream came from whoever was inside, but Naruto was already moving. He tackled the person to the ground, landing on top of whoever it was, and then sliding a kunai into his hand and pressing it against the person's neck. What are you doing in Rosweiss? Naruto blinked several times as he finally realized who the person beneath him was. What are you doing here? Her silver hair was in complete disarray now, surrounding her body like strands of fire. She wasn't wearing her usual business suit. A traditional blue kimono adorned her body. Naruto had to admit she looked good in a kimono. He wondered if he could convince her to wear one more often. Last night, you let me use your jacket, remember? Rosweiss seemed too stunned by their sudden situation to do anything but answer him. I was just returning it. Oh, now that she had said it, Naruto could indeed see that his jacket was sitting all nice and folded on his bed. A slight sense of embarrassment came over him. I'm sorry about that. When I sensed someone on the other side of the door who wasn't Kiba, I guess I panicked. No, it's okay. But, Naruto-san? Rosweiss squirmed beneath him. Yes, can you stop touching me please? At first, Naruto thought she was asking if he could get off her. He was straddling her waist, after all, but then he soon came to realize what she meant by touching. A quick glance down from her face revealed the reason. Perhaps it had been done out of instinct, or maybe there was some other reason for it, but Naruto's hand had slid into her kimono and pushed it apart, exposing her breasts. Because kimonos weren't supposed to be worn with underwear, she was not wearing a bra. As Naruto gazed at the full, round swells of her breasts, capped with light pink nipples, he realized that his hand was placed firmly on top of her left breast. Rosweiss had a large chest.
It wasn't as big as Rias's, but it was still large enough that his fingers were sinking into her chest as though it was a round pillow. He supposed that's where the name, Dirty Pillows, came from.
Naruto took a deep breath as he slowly removed his hand from Roswice's breast. After taking another deep breath, he pulled her kimono closed so he wouldn't keep gazing at her, and then climbed off. "I'm sorry about that," he said, offering his hand to her.
Roswice looked at his hand for a second before taking it, allowing him to slowly pull her up. "No, it's okay. When I saw that no one was inside, I just figured I would leave your jacket for you, but I shouldn't have come into your room without permission. This was my fault."
He couldn't dispute that, so he didn't say anything. Neither he nor Roswice spoke for the longest time, making Naruto wonder if he should say something to break the ice. He felt awkward. Maybe it was because Rias had asked if he had spoken with Roswice about what sort of romantic progress he'd made, but his heart was thumping in his chest. It didn't help that he could still remember the sensation of his fingers sinking into her boob. "Say," Naruto began after working up his courage, "you wouldn't be interested in going on a..." Before he could say anything else, the sound of voices coming down the hall alerted them to another problem. Naruto recognized some of the voices. They were teachers. "Oh, crap. I forgot teachers sometimes come to check on students and make sure they're asleep." And Naruto-san. Roswice was panicking. Those voices belonged to Karyu-sensei and Dojima-sensei. If they see me in here like this, I'll be in big trouble. What do I do? Naruto's first thought was shoving her into the bathroom, but then he remembered this room only had a small toilet space. What's more, it was too far for them to reach in time. This way, grabbing Roswice by the hand, Naruto went over to his bed, threw the covers up, shoved Roswice into the bed, and then got in himself. He pulled the covers over them both, though only Roswice was fully covered. He almost immediately regretted his decision. Roswice was practically lying on top of him. A good portion of her body was pressing into his legs, and he could feel her breasts against his crotch. It was causing him to react. From the squeak she emitted, Roswice had noticed his boner as well. The sound of the teachers' voices were getting near. "Why is this door open?" Dojima-sensei asked. "You don't think the students left, do you?" Karyu-sensei suggested. The two teachers entered the room and saw Naruto lying on the bed, everything up to his neck hidden underneath the covers. He tried not to squirm. However, it was proving very difficult. Roswice probably didn't mean to, but she was squirming around and touching him in ways that made his body feel like a live wire. "Hey, where is your roommate?" asked Dojima-sensei. "Kiba forgot something in the changing room." Naruto lied easily enough. He should be back shortly. The man frowned but accepted his explanation. "Whatever. Keep the door closed from now on." "Yes, sir." Huffing, the two teachers closed the door behind them as they left, and Naruto breathed a sigh of relief as their footsteps grew distant. "That was a close call, wasn't it?" Naruto said to Roswice, but he didn't receive an answer. "Roswice?" Growing a bit concerned, Naruto peeled back the covers to find Roswice huddled underneath the blanket. Her face was burnt red. In fact, it could probably outshine the sun, and it wasn't hard to figure out why. There was a large pitch tent holding up his pants. She was staring at the massive bulge like it was an alien creature she'd never seen before. "Roswice, snap out of it, huh?" Roswice blinked several times, looked at him, and then blushed to the roots of her hair. "I'm sorry. I just, seeing this from so close up is, well, you know, like..." No, it's no problem." Naruto waved off her apology. "You don't need to apologize. It's just that you might want to get off me now. Having such a beautiful woman on top of me is only making me more aroused." Oh, Roswice seemed shocked by his words because she didn't move. Naruto wondered if he should do something about her. Should he, remove her himself? She was basically lying on top of his legs, and her face was still inches from his erection. If he hadn't been wearing pants, Naruto was sure he'd be able to feel her breath on him. Of course, just thinking like that made his dick twitch. That seemed to cause a reaction in Roswice, who began spouting steam from her ears.
I. As Roswice stuttered to say something, the door to the room opened again and Kiba walked in. Dressed in a loose-fitting kimono, it really did look like he'd come back from the changing room. He paused upon seeing the position they were in. After taking a few seconds to study the situation further, he turned around and began walking back out. I'll leave for a while so you two can finish whatever you're doing, he said.
His words had the effect of snapping Roswise out of her stupor. Wait. This is just a misunderstanding. I'm a teacher. I wouldn't do that with a student while on a school field trip. Does that mean you would do it with me if we weren't on a school trip? Naruto couldn't help but ask. As Roswise blushed from the roots of her hair all the way down to her toes, Naruto couldn't help but enjoy seeing this woman get so embarrassed. He wondered if he was becoming a sadist, devil ninja. Naruto sighed as he walked beside Irina and Kiba. They were on their way to Kyoto Station. Is something wrong, Naruto? Asked Irina. I'm fine. Naruto sighed again. He's just depressed because of a misunderstanding that happened between him and Roswise last night, Kiba added. Naruto glared at him. And who caused that misunderstanding in the first place, Kiba only laughed as though it wasn't a big deal, but Naruto felt pretty bad. Not only had the events of last night caused a huge misunderstanding between him and Roswise, but that morning when Roswise had come down for breakfast with Azazel and the other teachers, she had studiously avoided looking in his direction. Given that she almost always greeted him and the others, her not even looking at them had been the key indicator that she was probably mad. Polyamorous relationships are complicated. Rias had given Naruto the go-ahead to form a relationship with multiple women. In other words, he was being allowed to have a harem. That said, he wasn't really sure what he should be doing. He was already in a relationship with Kaneko, Ravel, and possibly even Ophis, but his relationships with Irina and Roswise were complicated. Irina still had feelings for Issei and Roswise. Well, given what happened last night, he wasn't sure she would want to talk to him for a while. Then again, do I really need to form more romantic relationships? Rias had been pushing him in that direction, but he knew she had a reason for that, something beyond simply thinking it would make him happy. However, Naruto would have been perfectly content with just Rias. He wasn't like Issei. He didn't have any dreams of being a harem king, though it looked like he was already well on his way to earning that title. So, what was the plan today? Asked Naruto. We're going to visit Kinkakuji first, and then we're heading over to Arashiyama, followed by Nijo Castle, and ending on the Kyoto Imperial Palace, Kiba answered. Kuno said she would meet us at Kinkakuji. Sounds good. I'll be relying on you for directions. That's because you're lazy when it comes to planning.
Naruto could only shrug. Kiba was right. They hopped onto a tram after reaching Kyoto Station, which took them all the way to the station closest to Kinkakuji. As they were sitting on the tram, Naruto noticed that Irina looked depressed. Her shoulders were slumped, there was a dejected look on her face, and she kept sighing about something.
I'll talk to her later. It's too crowded to have a conversation here. It was only a 15-minute ride from Kyoto Station to the one near Kinkakuji. Upon getting off, they had to walk the rest of the way, but that just gave them the chance to see more of Kyoto. The temple was surrounded by numerous paths and other buildings with a traditional Japanese aesthetic. After paying the entrance fee, Naruto and the others entered through the main gate, where they were stopped by a young girl. Good morning. Kuno, once more dressed in her shrine maiden outfit, bowed to them. It is good to see you three. I trust you slept well. We did. Naruto spoke for everyone as they walked up to the young girl. Even knowing it probably wasn't proper etiquette, Naruto could not help but place his hand on Kuno's head and gently rub it. How are you this morning? Kuno flushed. I am well. Thank you for asking. Are you ready to begin the tour? I am. Naruto gave her a big, beaming smile. I'm excited to accompany all the famous sights in Kyoto with you. Despite her cheeks retaining their redness, Kuno puffed out her chest. Then I shall do my best to show you all of the great sights here in Kyoto. As Naruto urged Kuno to begin the tour, his ears twitched as he picked up a conversation between Kiba and Irina. Do you think Naruto realizes what he's doing? I don't think so. Kuno seems to be below his strike zone. I doubt he even realizes how his words are affecting her.
The poor girl. Naruto twitched several times as he tried to figure out what they meant by all that. Of course Kuno was below his strike zone. She was adorable, don't get him wrong, but she was just a kid. She wasn't like Kaneko, who fit the lowly archetype but was actually a high schooler, nor was she like Ophis, who was ageless and could change shape and genders at will.
Actually, that reminds me, Kuno, just how old are you? I'm 13. Naruto nodded. That was below his strike zone. With that knowledge in hand, The tour soon began as Kuno showed them around Kinkaku-ji. Known as the Temple of the Golden Pavilion, Kinkaku-ji was a Zen Buddhist temple, and one of the most popular tourist attractions within Kyoto. A three-story building on the grounds of the Rokuan-ji temple complex, the top 2 stories of the pavilion were covered in pure gold leaf, giving it an incredibly glossy and reflective sheen that caused light refractions. It gave it a sort of sparkle effect. Not only was the structure impressive, but Kinkaku-ji was built overlooking a large pond. Naruto, Kiba, and Irina walked beside Kuno on the other side of the pond. Apparently, tourists were not actually allowed near the building itself. Naruto thought about making a shadow clone and sneaking over, but he decided not to, for Kuno's sake if not his own. Kinkaku-ji was formerly known as Rokuan-ji. Kuno began giving them a lesson on the building. It was the retirement villa of the shogun, Ashikaga Yoshimitsu, and according to his will, it became a Zen temple of the Rinzai sect after his death in 1408. This temple was actually what inspired his grandson to build Ginkaku-ji on the other side of the city several decades later.
Naruto listened to Kuno's lecture on the building's history, which even he couldn't deny was interesting. According to her, Kinkaku-ji had been burned down numerous times throughout history, including twice during the Anan War, a civil war that destroyed much of Kyoto, and then once again in 1950 when it was set on fire by a fanatic monk. The group stopped near a small section of the pond. There was a stand where an old lady was selling snacks. Naruto ordered some dango from her and handed them out to the other 3. While Kiba accepted his food with a gracious smile, Irina took it with a strained look and Kuno blushed. Naruto sighed. Kuno's actions were simple enough to understand, but Irina's troubled him.
Yes, I will definitely have to talk with her again. He could only assume something had happened to make her like this. I've noticed that each floor of Kinkaku-ji looks like it was built differently from the others, Naruto said as he glanced at the temple again.
It was indeed as he said. The first floor was made with natural wood pillars and white plaster walls, which contrasted yet also complemented the gilded upper stories. Meanwhile, the second floor, aside from being covered in pure gold leaf, had a completely different style of roofing and the lattice work seemed different as well. The third floor was, likewise, different from the second and first floors. It also had a golden phoenix situated on top.
That's because each floor was built to represent a different style of architecture, Kuno explained. The first floor is built in the Shinden style used for palaces during the Heian period. The second floor is built in the Buck style used in samurai residences, and the third floor is built in the style of a Chinese Zen hall. Naruto looked at the structure again. It's really strange to mix styles like that, but they do complement each other nicely. As Naruto spoke with Kuno, Irina frowned at the pair. For some reason, watching these two talk so easily depresses me. Kiba shrugged. Maybe you should join them? I don't think I can. Irina looked away from Kiba when he glanced at her, causing him to shrug and drop the conversation. Naruto heard it all. He wondered if Irina realized his hearing was good enough to pick up on their conversation, but he doubted it. She wouldn't have said anything if she knew he was listening in. After visiting all the little areas around Kinkaku-ji, the group hopped onto the tram again, this time traveling toward Arashiyama.
Considered the second most important sightseeing district in Kyoto, Arashiyama was filled with temples and shrines, though the star attraction was definitely the famed Arashiyama bamboo grove, according to Kuno anyway. As they walked along a small path lined with simple fences made of bamboo on either side, Naruto could see why she would say such a thing. The bamboo trees were huge. They towered over them by at least several stories. Several of the trees near the fenced-off sections curved inward, forming a bit of a canopy. Once we get to the top of this hill, we'll reach the entrance to the Okochi Sanso Villa, Kuno told them. Just like she said, they soon reached the entrance to the villa in question. While the villa was quite the sight, it was the surrounding gardens that really boggled the mind. Even from the entrance, they could see the way the gardens spread out like a sea of greenery. Weaving between the gardens were numerous paths for tourists to walk through. They had to pay a 1,000 yen submission fee, but, well, they were kind of rich, so 4,000 yen for each person was chump change. As Kuno led them around and talked about how the villa was formerly the estate of a famous film actor named Okochi Denjiro, Naruto made sure to include Irina and Kiba in the conversation. Irina's words from before made him realize he'd been ignoring them in favor of Kuno.
He'd been trying to make Kuno feel welcome and important, since she was not only their guide but also the Princess of Kyoto, but he didn't want to neglect his friends, especially Irina. His actions seemed to make Irina brighten up a little. He even got a smile out of her, which he considered an accomplishment. She hadn't smiled all day. Even that morning during breakfast, her face had remained downtrodden. It's just like I thought, something must have happened last night. The tour of Okochi Sanso Villa took around half an hour, and at the end of the tour, they were allowed to have some Japanese sweets and a cup of hot matcha tea in the tea house near the exit. There were a few places to sit outside of the tea house. Naruto and the others sat on a long bench, with Naruto sitting between Kuno and Irina, while Kiba sat next to Irina at the end. Where should we go next? Naruto wondered out loud as he munched on a Japanese confectionery. Well, Kiba tilted his head. Our original plan was to head on over to Nijo Castle, but... Everyone glanced at Kuno, who was nibbling on her wagashi. She looked sort of like a chipmunk as she sat there. Naruto resisted his urge to act like one of those fanboys who go rapid over anime characters. Upon noticing the looks directed at her, Kuno hastily yet somehow daintily finished her meal. I can take you wherever you want. Nijo Castle, Kyoto Imperial Palace, Kozenji. Just let me know where you want to go. Kuno seemed a lot more comfortable around them because she was actually acting her age now. Her princess-like demeanor had disappeared. She seemed to be full of spirit and energy, unlike before when she had kept acting proper and dignified. Well, let's see some more sights around here first, and then we can head over to Nijo Castle, Naruto suggested. That sounds like a good idea, Irina agreed. Okay. Finally offering them a smile so bright Naruto thought he would go blind, Kuno placed her hands on her hips. Then just follow me. I'll take you to all of the great historic sites here. Thus, with their snacks and matcha finished, their tour continued. Devil Ninja, after leaving Arashiyama, Kuno took Naruto, Kiba, and Irina on a tour of Nijo Castle. Naruto had to admit that while he'd seen a good deal of buildings similar to the palaces in his old home, Nijo Castle and a few other places had some truly inspiring architecture. Seeing the large building connected by corridors with nightingale floors, the floors squeaked when you walked on them. And looking into the tatami mat-covered rooms featuring elegantly decorated ceilings and beautifully painted sliding doors was quite the sight. Once they finished visiting Nijo Castle, Kuno took them to a restaurant for lunch. According to her, this was one of the best places to eat in this particular area. They had great hot pots. The tofu hot pot here is considered a delicacy. As they sat around a table, Kuno fished the tofu out of the pot with her chopsticks and distributed them onto everyone's plates. She did so with a bright smile. Naruto hoped that meant she was enjoying her role as their hostess. Given what they had all seen yesterday, he had been worried about what kind of state this girl would be in. I wonder how long it will be before she can see her mother again. Here, Naruto. Kuno set some tofu onto his plate. He looked at her, which caused the girl to turn her head. This tofu has been simmering a bit longer than the others, so, it should be a lot more delicious. I see. Thank you. Naruto used my chopsticks to grab the tofu and popped it into his mouth. She was right. A burst of subtle yet fragrant flavor hit his tongue. It was different than the stuff he'd had yesterday. Better. This is delicious, thanks, Kuno. Kuno was not looking at him as she nodded. Naruto thought it was adorable. This has a very Japanese flavor, Kiba said. I'm not exactly sure how to describe it, but I feel like this isn't something you can eat anywhere else in the world. It is delicious, Irina agreed as she ate. While she was eating, Irina's eyes met Naruto's. She gazed at him for barely a second before looking away. He frowned. Did she know what he was thinking, that he was wondering about when the best time to talk to her would be? He didn't think she was a mind reader. That said, it wasn't like he had been subtle. Naruto had gazed at her several times throughout the day. There you guys are, an enthusiastic voice said. Naruto and the others turned around to find Issei and Asia walking up to them alongside Kiryu, Motohama, and Matsuda. Among them, Issei seemed to be in the highest spirits, though Asia was also glowing. Naruto knew immediately. Having sex with Rias on a regular basis meant he'd become accustomed to women glowing, and Asia had that same feel about her. They had sex. He knew they were at that stage, so this didn't surprise him, however. I see. Naruto glanced at Irina to find the girl hunched over and not looking in their direction, So that was it. She saw them having sex last night. Perhaps she had gone up to see Issei the night before and instead caught him mid-coitus with Asia. He remembered their talk the other day about monogamy. That probably had something to do with it, though he wouldn't know for sure until he talked to her. Tonight. I'll talk to her tonight. Putting on a smile, Naruto greeted the other group. Hey, I had almost forgotten that you guys were planning to visit Arashiyama today too. Yeah. Issei rubbed the back of his head. We just got back from visiting Tenryuji. It was awesome. They have this really amazing ceiling with a painting of a dragon on it. While Issei was rubbing his head, Asia was clinging to his other arm, subtly pushing her breasts into him. Issei didn't seem to mind. He actually looked rather happy. Hey, who is this cutie? While Naruto and Issei were talking, Motohama had gotten close to Kuno. Naruto turned their way. The poor girl was leaning back as the guy stared at her, breathing so heavily his glasses were getting fogged up. Was this guy one of those lolicons? A true blue dude who got aroused by elementary school kids? So cute. The Kiryu girl was also getting all up in Kuno's business, hugging her and rubbing their cheeks together. Get off of me, you lowly woman, don't act so familiar with me. Kuno did not seem to like the attention and tried to push the other girl away, but that only made Kiryu even more excited. As the girl began mumbling about how adorable Kuno's elegant manner of speech was, Naruto reached over and snatched their poor guide from her seat, and then set the girl on his lap. Sorry, he placed a hand on Kuno's head and rubbed her hair. But I'd like to ask that you not get into Kuno's personal space. He spoke with a bit of irony, well aware that he'd done just what he'd told them not to do. While Motohama's glasses flashed in anger, Kiryu placed her hands on her hips. And just what do you think it is you're doing right now, huh? Kuno doesn't mind it when I pet her head. Do you, Kuno? Naruto looked down at the girl whose head he was petting. Kuno's cheeks were red as she squirmed around, but she didn't seem to mind at all. She turned her head to glance at him, then looked back down before slowly shaking her head. It doesn't bother me. There, Naruto nodded, you see? What kind of unfair world is this? Motohama raged. Kiryu looked like she wanted to say something, but she had enough sense to back down. Naruto grinned to himself as he continued petting Kuno's head. It was weird, but he'd always had a way with kids, even back when he was a kid himself. It was like back with Konohamaru, Moegi, and Udon. Of course, back then he hadn't been into giving head pets, but he'd still been well liked, and after he defeated Pain, he'd become even more popular with kids. There'd even been times when he'd have a bunch of rugrats crawling all over him, asking him to tell them stories of his exploits. Some of the younger children would sit on his lap when he told them stories. In some ways, you could say he'd simply grown used to this kind of situation. The group eventually settled down. Issei, Asia, Kiryu, Motohama, and Matsuda joined them for a hot pot. As everyone split off into their own conversations, Naruto let Kuno back into her seat so he could continue eating, yet before he could even start again, a new voice stole his attention. I see you kids are all enjoying the sights of Arashiyama.
It was Azazel, the former general governor of the Gregorian, current teacher and faculty advisor for the Occult Research Club. He was sitting at the table alongside Rossweiss. Naruto noticed right away that the Valkyrie looked annoyed. There was a vein bulging on her forehead, and her face was set in a stern frown of disapproval. Of course, Azazel was drinking sake, so that was probably it.
Isn't it bad for a teacher to be drinking in the middle of the day? Naruto asked as he stood up and wandered over to their table. He heard a squawk behind him, which came from Kuno. I told him the exact same thing, Rossweiss muttered in anger. I keep telling him to act more responsibly in front of the students, but he won't listen to me. Come on, Azazel said with an irresponsible wave of his hand. I'm just taking a short break after we finished our investigation of Arashiyama. Seeing the way Azazel was lackadaisically sprawled on his chair, Naruto had a hard time believing he'd been searching for the Chaos Brigade. You know, Azazel continued, giving Rossweiss a lecherous look. You'd be much cuter if you let your hair down every once in a while. It's because you're so strict that you've never been able to find a man. Naruto winced. That was harsh. Crack, at Azazel's comment, Rossweiss slammed her fist onto the table as her face turned a unique shade of red. Getting drunk has nothing to do with finding a boyfriend. Don't mess with me. I'm perfectly capable of drinking whenever I want, just watch. Before anyone could stop her, Roswise grabbed Azazel cup and threw it back. Naruto could only stare in shock as the woman downed the whole drink like it was water.
Pawa. She thash. I can drinkish just fine.
Naruto palmed his face as Roswise, her face now a shade of pink, swayed in her seat as she glared at Azazel. One drink. Just one drink and she's already so drunk she can't even speak properly. You're drunk from just a single cup of sake? Even Azazel looked shocked, but Roswise poured another drink and downed it. She glared right at the fallen angel, or, well, she kind of glared off to the side. It looked like her eyes were going crossed.
I'm not drunk. I've been drinking ever since I became Odin's bodyguard. This reminds me of that old man. I spent so much time taking care of him during his trips but all he ever cared about was rubbish like ladies and bozy and breeches. He was vulgar. Completely shameless All the other Valkyries of Valhalla called me the old mannish servant girl. They made fun of me. Ish all his fault. That's why I have no boyfriend. No boyfriend, no boyfriend. Wah.
Great. Look at that, Azazel. You made her cry. Naruto sighed as Roswise began wailing. He cast a glare at Azazel, who looked like he wasn't sure what to do. Seeing the man scratching his head, all Naruto could do was sigh. I've got this, he said. You sure? Asked Azazel. It's better than letting you handle her. Roswise let out a squeal when Naruto scooped the woman into his arms. However, the moment she realized he was carrying her like a princess, she became somehow ecstatic.
Haha. Naruto, Sean, you really are a great guy, aren't you? I feel just like a princess in your arms. Ah ha ha.
Naruto tried to maintain his smile as the scent of booze washed over his face. He was fortunately used to drunk women. Jiraiya took him to bars all the time during their 2-year training trip, and Tsunade had been the heaviest drinker he'd ever met. Of course, Tsunade could actually hold her liquor unlike the woman he was carrying. Kuno. Naruto glanced at the young girl. I'm sorry, but could I take a rain check on the rest of our tour? I suppose. Kuno was frowning, but she still had the sense to nod. Thanks, maybe you could give me a personal tour of Kyoto once I finish taking care of Roswise. A personal tour? Kuno squeaked. Yes, I'd be happy to. I'll be in your care. Naruto said goodbye to the others and walked out of the restaurant with the drunk Roswise in his arms. His destination was their hotel. Of course, he had no intention of walking. After finding a deserted alley, Naruto created a teleportation circle and instantly transported himself and Roswise to his room. Naruto, Roswise was cooing. Naruto, her face suddenly turned green. I feel sick. Sighing, Naruto said, hold on, and carried her into the toilet. He flipped up the toilet seat with his foot and positioned Roswise over it. He barely had enough time to move her hair out of her face before she started vomited into the bowl. A horrid stench filled the air. Naruto wrinkled his nose. Even Kurama wrinkled his nose. That smells awful. Vomit never smells good. Holding her hair in one hand, Naruto rubbed her back with his other hand, trying to soothe the woman's sickness. It was sad he didn't know medical ninjutsu. With little else to do, he waited until the woman had stopped vomiting. Are you okay, Roswise? No, the woman muttered. She still sounded a tad drunk. I feel ashamed. Naruto didn't tell her there was nothing to feel ashamed about. She did just get completely wasted, after all. It had also only taken her one drink to get smashed. That was kind of pathetic. However, it wasn't like this was the first time she'd done this. Once she finished throwing up, Naruto pulled Roswise away from the toilet, closed the lid, and flushed it. He then lifted the woman up. She couldn't stand on her own 2 legs and fell into him. Naruto ignored the feeling of her breasts pushing into his chest as he set her down on the toilet seat. I can't believe I did that. Roswise had tears in her eyes. I must look like a mess. A bit, Naruto admitted as he filled a plastic cup with water. But you shouldn't worry about that right now. Here. Swish this around in your mouth and spit it back into the cup. Roswise did as she was told, and then Naruto took the cup from her, emptied it into the sink, cleaned the cup out, and then filled it with mouthwash. He had her repeat the process several times. His hope was that the mouthwash would get rid of her vomit breath. To make sure her breath no longer smelled, Naruto cupped her face, lifted her head, and brought his face close. Roswise stared at him through half-lidded eyes and flushed cheeks. "Are you going to kiss me? Do you want me to kiss you?" Naruto nodded as he found that her breath no longer had the acrid stench of vomit. "Well, maybe you should let me take you on a date first." Roswise looked shocked. "You would date me?" "Yes. Even though I'm a 100 yen shop-loving Valkyrie who couldn't get a single boyfriend in Valhalla and can't drink to save her life? I don't see what's so bad about that. Personally, I think you're very attractive and cute." "Why, you do?" "Yes. Then, after the school trip." "What? Will you let me take you on a date after the school trip?" "Oh." Roswise paused for a moment, her eyes growing brighter as his words penetrated her mind. Then she blessed him with a radiant smile. "Yes. I would like that." Naruto made sure Roswise drank plenty of water to rehydrate after she got drunk, and then he carried her to his bed, slipped off her shoes, and laid her down on top of the covers. She was asleep before her head even hit the pillow. He stared at her for a moment, brushing her silver bangs away from her face. Then with a soft sigh, he stepped back and teleported back to the same alley he'd used to get back to his hotel room. Gotta catch up with the others. As he walked toward where he felt vague concentrations of demonic power, Naruto felt something envelope his body. It was warm and slippery, like he was being covered in a layer of mucus. He stopped walking. What was that feeling? As he looked around, Naruto was shocked to discover that all of the people who'd been walking alongside him, tourists and residents, were all gone. You'd better hurry, Naruto. I sense a strong energy radiating from where your friends are." Heeding Kurama's advice, Naruto burst into a sprint, traveling toward where his friends were. He hoped they were okay. Devil Ninja, Irina had never felt more conflicted in her life. They were walking across a traditional wooden bridge that went over the Katsura River. The 155-meter bridge was a well-known scenic spot in Kyoto. The artistic form of the bridge was an excellent match with the surrounding nature and was a symbol in Kyoto that embodied the aesthetic sense of Japan as a whole. What's more, the Arashiyama mountain was right next to the bridge, coated in red leaves that gave the entire area a unique sense that autumn was upon them. According to Kiryu, this was the Togetsukiyo Bridge. Did you know? Kiryu began, according to legend, you aren't supposed to turn back in the middle of crossing the Togetsukiyo. Why is that? Asked Asia. Kiryu chuckled. Because if you look back while crossing the bridge, the intelligence granted to you by the heavens will be taken back. Of course, if the perverted trio looks back, it will be all over for them. They were already dumb to begin with. Shut up, Matsuda, Motohama, and Issei shouted in unison. Unfazed by their shouts, Kiryu continued. Another legend says that if you look back, you will be separated from your lover. This one is a bit inauspicious, but I will never look back. Irina felt her heart sink as Asia grabbed Issei's arm and gave him a tearful glance. It's okay, Asia. It's just a legend, Issei reassured her. Asia shook her head and grabbed his arm tighter. Irina felt like an icy hand had clutched her heart in its grip. She'd known Issei and Asia were an item since her mission to reclaim the stolen Excaliburs, and she had even known that Akano had once been a part of the equation, though something happened that caused her to separate from them. However, Irina had at one point hoped to make Issei hers. When she had been sent back to Japan, she had been ecstatic because it meant she'd be able to see him again, but upon her return, she discovered the truth. Not only was Issei already in a relationship, he wanted to become a harem king, and furthermore, he had not even realized Irina was a girl. He'd thought she was a boy this whole time. Maybe I was a bit of a tomboy, but did he really not know I was a girl? She felt a little insulted, but she also felt hurt. The boy she had loved hadn't loved her back. The boy she had thought about constantly barely even remembered her. Even worse, he was already in a relationship. I could probably join them. The thought penetrated her brain before she could help it. It was true. She could probably join Asia as a member of Issei's harem if she wanted, but that went against her Christian values. What's more, Naruto, her heart felt like it was being split in half, with one half that belonged to her childhood crush and the other belonging to Naruto. Despite being in a relationship with several other women, Naruto had made her feel welcome, helped her out when she needed it, talked to her, and went out with her. He made time for her. There didn't seem to be any particular reason he did it. Irina just got the sense that Naruto was really nice. She remembered the conversation they had the other day.
She had told Naruto that she'd given up on Issei, but that wasn't the full truth. Irina had sort of still hoped something would happen, but then she'd gone to talk with Issei last night with the hopes of maybe confessing to him, and that was when she finally saw it. Asia and Issei having sex. They hadn't locked the door, and so she'd been able to see it from start to finish.
Oddly enough, seeing them hadn't been the heart-shattering experience she'd imagined it to be. After silently closing the door and pondering the matter, she realized that while part of her emotionally dead response was shock, another part was that she'd already accepted it, also. An image of a bright smile, of blonde hair and blue eyes, of whiskers. Irina shook her head. Naruto was even more problematic than Issei. He was in a polyamorous relationship. Dating him would go against God's precepts even more. As this thought passed through her mind, a strange feeling enveloped her body, causing Irina to look up. Everyone was gone. No, not everyone. Issei, Kiba, and Asia were still present, but Kiryu, Matsuda, Motohama, and all the other tourists had disappeared. "What is going on?" asked Issei. Kiba narrowed his eyes. "This is..." Before he could finish his sentence, a thick mist floated up from under their feet, surrounding them. "Do you know what this is, Kiba?" asked Irina. "Dimension lost." Kiba knelt on the bridge and tried to touch the mist with his hand. "One of the Longinus. I remember hearing Azazel Sensei mention it before." Irina also knew of Dimension Lost, one of the 13 Longinus sacred gears said to have the power to kill a god. Using a special mist it created, Dimension Lost, also known as the Fog of Extinction, was able to block any attack and transport anything inside the mist to an artificially created space. "Hey!" A shout alerted them to the fact that they were not alone. Everyone turned to find Naruto running over to them. "Are you guys okay?" "We're fine," Issei shouted. "It looks like everyone except us has disappeared," Naruto muttered. "I'm not sure what's going on, but it seems we've been forcefully transferred to an alternate dimension and sealed inside." He looked around. "I'm kinda impressed. Whoever sent us here made it look like an exact replica of the Togatsukyo. It looks like there's a Longinus user with the power to create an even stronger alternate dimension than the ones we devils use for our raiding games," Kiba said as he stood back up. Kuno reached out and grabbed Naruto's jacket. Mother's dying guard reported that they had also been trapped in a mist without warning. "I see." Naruto placed a hand on her head. "It looks like this is a trap laid out by the Chaos Brigade." Naruto turned his head, and Irina looked in the direction he'd turned to find several figures appearing from within the mist. The one in front was a handsome man with black hair. He was wearing a school uniform, though wrapped around it was a garment that resembled Han Chinese clothing. He was carrying a spear that caused a chill to run down Irina's spine. There were several people with him. Most of them were wearing modified school uniforms. There was a boy with an emotionless expression, a handsome young man with silver-white hair, a blonde-haired and blue-eyed beauty, a tall man standing over 2 meters and decked in Greek armor, and... It can't be. Irina took a step back. The last person was a young woman with chin-length blue hair, though a single fringe had been dyed green. Her brown eyes lacked any emotion. It was like they were dead. Her well-endowed body was covered in a black, skin-tight, short-sleeved unitard with pauldrons, matching fingerless gloves, and thigh-high boots. Resting on her shoulder was a uniquely shaped broadsword with a blue blade and golden edge. Irina recognized Durandal as surely as she recognized the wielder. Xenovia, no. Irina felt her heart quake. Her worst fears had come true. "Cow cow." Naruto grinned from ear to ear as he stepped forward. "It's been such a long time since we last saw each other. How have you been? You look quite dapper for a man who received a Rasengan to the chest." "Stop calling me that. That's not even how you pronounce my name, you idiot." The boy bristled for a second but calmed down quickly, though he still looked annoyed. "I'll call you whatever I want." Naruto's grin was so wide it stretched his whiskers and made him look like a fox. But then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the smile left. Irina shuddered. "Tell me, are you the one who kidnapped this girl's mother?" "Girl? Ah. The Princess of Kyoto." Cao Cao's eyes landed on Kuno, who was partly hidden behind Naruto. "You're correct. I was the one who took her mother. You see, we are in the middle of an experiment and wish to have Yasaka-sama cooperate with us." At his words, Kuno bared her fangs, eyes glimmering with traces of tears. She looked positively furious. Not that Irina didn't understand why. And why are you doing this? Surely it's not because you're still trying to help Ophis. In case you haven't realized it yet, your benefactor has been living with me for the past several months. Ophis is a whimsical being. Cao Cao shrugged. I'm sure she'll return to us at some point. But you are correct. We're not here to fulfill our benefactor's wish. I have another reason for needing Yasaka-sama. Removing the spear from his shoulder, the young man pointed it at Naruto and grinned. You're a threat to humanity, Naruto. You took my Longinus to the chest and still live. Only a monster on par with Ophis herself could survive such an attack. That is why I have decided to remove you before you can do any more damage to my plans. Chapter 36 Battle on the Togetsukiyo Bridge. Naruto stared at Cao Cao with what he hoped was a suitably incredulous look. I'm a threat, so you'll remove me? Dude, are you even listening to yourself? That was like the most cliched line in the history of cliched lines spewed by corny villains in low-budget action flicks ever. His words had the effect of making Kiba snort into his hand, while Issei outright laughed and even Asia giggled a little bit. Irina looked a tad incredulous, but even she broke into a resigned smile. Kuno just seemed shocked. She was staring at him with her big, wide eyes like she couldn't believe he was insulting their enemy. A vein appeared on Cao Cao's forehead. Your insults haven't changed at all, but I'm done talking to you. Leonardo, I'll let you handle the devils. A boy with dark skin stepped forward. He looked pretty young, though that was mostly because he was so short compared to everyone else. His grayish-blue hair was cut short and messy, leaving his purple eyes visible. The clothing he wore was the same school uniform as Cao Cao and the others, however, he'd thrown a jacket with a hood over it. Without warning, shadows appeared underneath the boy's feet, rapidly expanding across the ground like the tendrils of an abominable monster. Everyone, be careful, Naruto warned. That boy has the Annihilation Maker. I've heard about it from Azazel. It's a powerful sacred gear. It allows him to create a countless number of monsters based on his imagination. That sounds like a troubling sacred gear, Kiba mumbled as he created a pair of swords in his hands, one holy and one demonic. You are correct, Cao Cao said with a laugh. This boy carries one of the Longinus. It's not the same as my true Longinus, but it is a deadly sacred gear nonetheless. I don't believe you have been acquainted with its power yet, Naruto. The shadows continued to grow, soon covering the entire Togetsukiyo Bridge. Then the shadows writhed like living creatures, expanded, and took shape. Arms appeared from out of the shadows. They landed on the ground and flexed as though pulling something out of a deep ocean. Next came the heads. Wide gaping jaws and glowing red eyes appeared from the surrounding shadows, followed by a neck, shoulders, and a torso. It was not long before these monsters fully emerged from the ground. Naruto decided to call these creatures shadow monsters since they had black skin and emerged from the shadows at Leonardo's feet. They were bipedal. Their solidly built bodies were covered in thick muscle and rough hides. Naruto noticed their sharp claws and teeth as the monsters formed a line and stood at the forefront of the battlefield. I want all of you to be careful, Naruto said. Annihilation Maker and the other sacred gear, Dimension Lost, are incredibly dangerous. How so? Asked Issei. His sacred gear was already out, the Red Dragon Emperor gauntlet glistening in the misty world they found themselves in. Annihilation Maker is a lot like Kiba's sword birth. However, where Kiba can create countless swords, this boy can create countless demonic beasts of various strength and power. All it requires is imagination. He could even create one of those massive, fire-breathing monsters that are over 100 meters tall. Ever seen Godzilla? It's like that. Dimension Lost is even worse. That mist of his can transfer people straight into the dimensional gap. Imagine if someone had the power to cover an entire country with mist. They could send it straight to the dimensional gap and the country and its people would be destroyed. Issei, Kiba, Asia, and Irina all paled. Kuno was also quite pale, but she was spending most of her time glaring at Cao Cao. Fortunately, no one here is at that level, Naruto assured them. While I was being held captive, I made sure to get as much information on these people as possible. They're definitely tough customers, but they aren't like those broken characters you see in some video games. So, what do we do? Asked Irina. How do we defeat this sacred gear user? Though her words said she was focused on the battle at hand, She only had eyes for Xenovia, who stood alongside the other hero faction members. Irina hadn't taken her eyes off the blue-haired woman since she appeared.
The best way to defeat Annihilation Maker is to target the user. According to all the information I gathered while in captivity, Leonardo hasn't mastered using his sacred gear yet. If he had, the hero faction would have created multiple armies and attacked every faction by now. We have to take him out before he can mature. Naruto narrowed his eyes. Of course, Leonardo does have one specialty.
Cao Cao's lips slowly peeled into a smile, sardonic and twisted though it was. I see you didn't just let yourself be captured for kicks like I first suspected. The man narrowed his eyes. I wonder how much you know. I know enough. Naruto shrugged, not letting in on the fact that half the reason he knew so much was because Valley, Kuroka, Biku, and Fei-chan had fed him a good portion of that information. Really, the only person who hadn't helped him was Arthur. That may have been his fault. Arthur was such a stuck-up prick that Naruto couldn't help but tease him. In either event, Naruto knew everything the members of Team Valley knew. Cao Cao narrowed his eyes. You're pretty good. I guess you don't call yourself a ninja for nothing. He glanced at the shadow monsters, primed and ready to attack the members of Rias Gremory's peerage at a moment's notice, and then back at him. You're correct. Leonardo still hasn't fully mastered his power. That said, he does have one specialty, as you said, creating monsters that target his opponent's weaknesses. I like to call them anti-monsters. He grinned. And these current demonic beasts were made specifically to counter devils. As if his words were some kind of cue, one of the monsters opened its mouth. Naruto only had a brief instant to realize what was about to happen. His eyes widened. Everyone get behind me. Naruto didn't have time to look back as he held out his hands and channeled wind chakra through them. He mixed the chakra with demonic power, creating a massive wall of wind composed of over several million tiny magic circles. In that instant, a beam of light shot from the beast's mouth and slammed into the windshield. Naruto grunted as he slid back slightly. The beam continued pushing against his barrier, crackling and hissing as it tried to break through. If his shield had been made entirely of demonic power, it might have done just that, but Naruto's shield was composed mostly of chakra. It wasn't demonic by nature. The barrier held. That was a light attack, Issei exclaimed. No way, Irina muttered. That's the same kind of power angels have. Naruto took a calming breath. I see I wasn't the only one gathering information. Cao Cao smirked. Of course not. Every good strategist knows that having information on your enemy is the key to victory. I had Leonardo here create monsters that could help him gather intel on our enemies. All that data was then compiled for him to use in his sacred gear, allowing him to create anti-monsters. Tapping his spear on the ground, Cao Cao chuckled. The current anti-devil anti-monsters can produce light attacks equivalent to a mid-class angel. If Naruto could have cursed, he probably would have. It looked like he'd underestimated Cao Cao. Granted, it wasn't hard to do. This guy screamed arrogant prick. That kind of person almost always overestimated themselves, and so Naruto hadn't given him too much thought, despite knowing about how powerful he was. That was his bad. Knowing that battle would be upon them once this very necessary pre-battle banter was out of the way, Naruto formulated a plan of action. Aiz, I want you to quickly enter your balance breaker. Kiba, you'll be protecting Aiz while he enters it. After that, I'll be relying on you, Aiz, to take care of those monsters while Kiba protects Asia and Kuno. Got it, Issei said as he clenched his gauntlet-covered hand. Boost. It seems you have a plan. Kiba created several more swords, though he only held the two. I'll follow your lead. What about me? Asked Irina. She already had the short sword Kiba had made for her in hand. Her angel wings were also out. Naruto didn't say anything, but he noticed that a small portion of her wings had turned black. Just a few feathers, but still. I'm going to cut a path through these monsters so I can take on Heracles, Georg, Sigrid, and Jean. Follow me in. I'll take you straight to Xenovia so you can make her see reason, with your fists if you have to. Naruto, Irina's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I have just one question, Kiba said. Naruto frowned. What is it? Who is going to take on Cao Cao? Don't worry. Azazel is going to handle him. As if his words had been some kind of cue, a massive spear of light pierced the ground where Cao Cao had been standing. Had been because he leapt back before the attack could hit him. Oddly enough, the bridge did not receive any damage. Naruto assumed Azazel had cancelled his attack the moment it missed so it wouldn't destroy the bridge everyone was standing on. Everyone looked up as Azazel swooped down, a spear in his hand. He slammed it against Cao Cao's holy spear, the true Longinus, creating a violent shock wave that rippled outward. It was powerful enough that the Katsura River was disturbed. Waves crashed against the bridge, causing water to spray violently into the air. Ho! Cao Cao grinned as he pushed his spear against Azazel's, who had the advantage of gravity on his side. Not even a proper greeting before you attack. That shows poor form, Governor General. That's former Governor General, and you have no right to talk about poor form, given your rude hit-and-run attacks against our faction. I suppose you have a point. The two began attacking each other in quick succession, more shock waves spreading across the bridge, causing it to rock. Azazel took to the skies soon, forcing Cao Cao to follow him as they took their battle further away. With the initiation of the battle between Azazel and Cao Cao, the others decided it was time to fight as well. The shadow monsters surged forward to attack them en masse. It was like watching a wall of darkness press closer. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Several dozen Narutos surged forward, meeting the shadow monster army head-on. Rasengan. They created a Rasengan in each hand and used them to attack with great zeal, annihilating the monsters as if they were nothing. Body parts flew through the air as the Narutos, running in a spear point formation, plunged into their depths. Once they breached the army, the Narutos spread out and widened the gap. Then, from within that gap, the real Naruto flew out with Irina following close behind him. He's coming. Heracles rushed forward to meet Naruto, his hand already pulled back to punch him. I'm going to pay you back for what you did to me. Heracles threw a punch, a straight jab that moved at speeds so fast it broke the sound barrier, but Naruto slipped underneath the attack and slammed a Rasengan into the underside of the man's forearm. As Heracles howled and pulled his hand back, Naruto slid beneath the man and kicked his legs out from underneath him. The massive man fell onto the bridge with a loud thud that rocked the Togatsukyo. In a one-on-one match, Naruto would have finished this man by slitting his throat with a kunai. That didn't happen here. Jin and Siegfried attacked Naruto in a pincer maneuver. The silver-haired swordsman was swinging Gram, the strongest demon sword in the world. Meanwhile, Jin was attacking him with a holy sword she had created from her sacred gear, Blade Blacksmith. Naruto ducked underneath Siegfried's swing. However, Jin appeared to have anticipated what he would do, for she was attacking exactly where he appeared upon dodging. Her blade pierced right through his head. Gotcha, Foxy. Jin's cry of victory turned into a scream of shock when Naruto disappeared and a log took his place. You should never let an opponent get behind you. Naruto whispered behind her. The woman froze for 1 second, but 1 second was all Naruto needed. Senin Garashi, Leaf Village Secret Finger Jutsu. 1000 Years of Death. What the hell kind of technique is that? Jin's face as Naruto jabbed his fingers straight up her ass was a sight to behold. Her entire face contorted in a mixture of shock, pain, and humiliation before she was launched into the air like a missile. She held her hands to her abused butt as she flew well over the bridge and slammed into the water. A large splash went up. Ha 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 ha. Naruto placed his hands on his hips, thrust out his chest, and laughed. Nobody can withstand the most powerful of techniques. How did you like it? Did you enjoy having my fingers shoved up your rectum? As an enraged cry from somewhere in the water echoed around the battlefield, Siegfried and Heracles attacked him in concert. Naruto slipped around Heracles' punch and launched a heel kick into the man's chest. It didn't do much. Heracles was quite durable, and so the most it did was push him back, but Naruto used that space to avoid Gram, which the silver-haired pretty boy swung at him. Of course, it wasn't just Gram that Naruto had to worry about. Balmung, another powerful demon sword, suddenly appeared in Naruto's face, though he avoided the attack with a quick substitution jutsu. Balmung drilled through the log with ease, a powerful whirlwind expanding outward as it blew the log apart. Oh, blessed log! Naruto clapped his hands together in prayer. I thank thee for thine sacrifice. May you forever shine in log heaven. Naruto had scarcely finished praying to the log when several dozen magic circles appeared around him. From each magic circle came a wide and diverse range of powerful attacks. Ice. Fire. Light. darkness. Every conceivable magic he could think of flew at him, exploding against the very ground he'd been standing on. Did that get him? Asked Georg as he stared into the expanding cloud of destruction. What do you think? Asked a voice behind him. Georg froze, and in that moment, the person who'd been standing behind him attacked. Rasengan. Naruto's swirling blue ball of energy slammed into Georg's back and sent him sailing. The man didn't scream in pain, oddly enough, but the attack launched him clear across the bridge. He slammed into the ground, tumbled along, and then hit the railing, which cracked underneath the force. As Georg broke through the rail and plummeted into the waters below, Naruto found himself with little time to celebrate. Heracles and Siegfried were attacking him again. Both of them were using their balance breakers, too. 4 arms had grown out of Siegfried's back. They were not regular arms, but the arms of a dragon. Held within each arm was a sword. Nothung, Tierfang, Dainsleague, and a light sword. Meanwhile, he held Gram in his left hand and Balmung in his right. He attacked Naruto with a series of lightning-fast slashes and jabs. Whirlwinds flew all around him. Explosions rocked the ground at his feet and caused the air to burst, and large pillows of ice shot from the ground to skewer him. Naruto moved. He danced across the ground to avoid the explosions, negated the whirlwinds with powerful wind chakras shaped like a drill, and destroyed the ice spears with Rasengans. The constant attacks from 6 different swords left Naruto with little time to counter. He replaced himself with another log, hoping it would give him some breathing room, but Heracles had been waiting for just such an occasion. His body glowing, the aura surrounding him had transformed into numerous objects shaped like missiles. Heracles shouted a battle cry as he launched the missile-like projectiles at Naruto, who channeled more wind chakra into his fists and punched each missile out of the sky. The missiles detonated. The explosions were powerful enough to push him back. As he stumbled backward, Heracles burst out from the explosions and threw a powerful punch. Naruto crossed his arms. The punch was powerful, no doubts there. Naruto could feel it in his bones as he was lifted clean off his feet. As he soared through the air, Jean appeared underneath him. She looked awfully pissed. Not only were her clothes soaking wet, but her face was red and steam poured out of her ears. I'm going to enjoy murdering you, balance breaker, stake victim dragon. Hundreds of thousands or perhaps even millions of holy swords appeared around Jean, swirling together and taking on the shape of a dragon that was at least 15 meters tall. It was so big that it barely fit on the bridge. The creature opened its mouth wide as Naruto flew toward it, and then it chomped down on Naruto and swallowed him whole.
Yes, I got him. Jean cried out victoriously. No, you didn't. Siegfried looked up. He replaced himself again.
What? Jean looked up as well to find 2 Narutos plummeting toward the ground. One of them had his hand outstretched, a swirling Rasengan floating above it, while the other was adding wind chakra into the attack. I've got this. Heracles snarled and bent his knees to jump, except he didn't move. What the? Looking down, Heracles found nearly a dozen hands emerging from the ground to grab his legs. He barely had a second to figure out what was happening before another Naruto appeared in front of him, a giant ball of swirling blue energy held within his thrust-out hand. Udoma Rasengan. The attack slammed into Heracles, exploding with enough force to send shockwaves everywhere. Heracles was blasted clean off his feet. The clone who attacked him disappeared in a puff of smoke as its chakra was used up. While Heracles was attacked by a clone, the real Naruto finished creating his jutsu and fell upon the dragon like an avenging angel. Fuuten Rasengan. The Fuuten Rasengan might have been a weaker variation of the Rasen Shuriken, but it still produced millions of cutting blades that sliced through the dragon's neck. Metal squealed as his attack tore straight through the creature. As he landed on the ground, the dragon's head fell to the bridge and shattered. Of course, the dragon was still moving even without the head. It was, after all, something being controlled by Jean. Naruto leapt backward as a massive claw slammed into the ground. His dodge took him right to Jean, who attacked him with numerous lightning-quick thrusts and slashes. How are you able to dodge me? Meeting Jean's frustrated growls with a bright smile, Naruto said, How could I not dodge you? You're so slow. Jean let out a frustrated howl as she tried to attack him alongside her dragon, but Naruto dodged her next attack, and then shoved her in front of the dragon as it prepared to stomp on him. The dragon stopped attacking for fear of hitting Jean. Naruto used that time to slip beneath it. Fuuten. Shinku Renpa, wind release. Vacuum serial waves. Naruto took a deep breath, then exhaled several blades of wind, rapidly moving his head from side to side so the blades would fly out at different angles. The blades sliced clean through the dragon. Each attack cut something off. A leg, the tail, a part of its torso. The dragon soon fell apart. He would have pat himself on the back, but Naruto found himself surrounded by Jean, Siegfried, Heracles, and Georg. All of them were injured in some way. George was hunched over, Heracles had a massive spiral mark on his chest, Siegfried had numerous cuts on his arms and legs, and Jean's clothing was ruined. As he looked at the enemies, he released a sigh. "I'd give anything to enter Sage Mode," he muttered. "Don't even think about it," a voice growled inside of him. "I'm not going to. I just wish I could." As he spoke those words, the 4 members of the hero faction attacked again. Devil Ninja. The moment Naruto had broken through the line of shadow monsters, Irina, who'd been following close behind him, split off and charged straight toward Xenovia. She met the woman in a clash of swords. Irina's light sword ground against Durandal, the holy sword wielded by her friend. Because Xenovia was a power fighter, she was much stronger than Irina, a technique fighter. Despite this, she strained her muscles and pushed against Xenovia's blade with all her might. Her muscles strained, veins bulged on her arms, and her legs locked up as she flexed her thigh muscles. "Why?" she all but screamed as she asked that single-word question. Xenovia looked away, causing frustration to well up inside of her heart. "Why would you do this? Why did join the hero faction?" "You should know why better than anyone," Xenovia said as she used her superior strength to push Irina away. She would have gone flying backward, but Irina flapped her angel wings and landed adroitly on the bridge floor several meters from Xenovia. The two of them faced off. However, neither of them attacked. "I see you've become an angel," Xenovia muttered in a cool voice. "Congratulations. I know that's always been your dream." "You could have become an angel too," Irina said, her voice sounding as if it was on the verge of tears. "You could have joined me and become one of Michael's brave saints." Xenovia snorted as she shifted her stance. "I'm not like you, Irina. I don't have your level of devotion and faith. When I discovered that God was dead, my entire world felt like it had come to an end. Everything I had believed was a lie. What made it worse was that the church higher-ups knew about God's death and said nothing. They lied to me. How can I forgive that?"
"So you joined the hero faction?" Irina shouted as she raced toward Xenovia, tears flying from her eyes.
The two of them met in a series of powerful attacks. Irina swung her light sword, but Xenovia destroyed it with a swing of Durandal, though all that meant was she had to create another sword. Xenovia raised Durandal into the air and brought it down, the atmosphere howling as it was rent, but Irina moved out of the way. She almost gawked as a powerful blast of energy carved straight through the bridge like it was made of paper. She'd known Durandal was a powerful holy sword, but being on the receiving end of it was a different experience entirely. "What else was I supposed to do?" asked Xenovia as she brought Durandal back around in a powerful horizontal attack. Irina flitted into the air to avoid it. "I had nothing left after that. I'm not like you, Irina. I couldn't go on pretending everything was okay after what happened. I was empty. When the hero faction asked me to join them, they said I could find a new purpose."
Xenovia swung Durandal despite it not being long enough to reach Irina. However, each swing of her blade generated a powerful destructive force that flew at Irina, forcing her to weave around in the sky and dodge the attacks. Even dodging was dangerous, though. The amount of power behind those aura attacks caused the very air to burst, pushing against Irina and knocking her off course.
Not giving up, Irina created several light-based weapons that resembled halos and threw them at Xenovia. The woman down below destroyed them with a swipe of Durandal. However, Irina then created a light spear and sent it hurtling toward her former partner like a javelin. Xenovia raised her blade. The light spear slammed into the flat end of Durandal, and the power behind the spear was enough that she skid backwards along the ground. When the power of the spear vanished, Xenovia lowered her sword, only to find Irina right in her face. A whirlwind of blades appeared all around them as the two attacked each other with increasingly sloppy swings of their swords. It was less like they were trying to injure each other and more like they were releasing all of their frustration at each other. Alongside their battle of blades was the battle of words. I understand why you would be angry at what happened, but that doesn't mean you had to abandon us. How could I not abandon the church when the church already abandoned me by lying? They didn't have a choice, there's always a choice. The two were forced apart when their latest clash of blades created a near-catastrophic shockwave between them. They skidded along the bridge before stopping several meters away from each other. Running at each other again, the two met in another clash filled with blades and tears. Devil Ninja, Overbooster, Balance Breaker. Issei entered his balance breaker almost as soon as the battle started. He could feel energy flowing through him, feel his body getting stronger just by donning the armor of his balance breaker. However, he didn't charge in right away. There was something he had to do first. Asia, promote me to bishop, yes. The moment he said those words, Asia took out a small card, one that Rias had given to her before they left on their trip. Issei felt power surge through him as his demonic power was raised past its natural limit. The reason he had chosen to be promoted to bishop was so he could focus on using long-range bombardment. A crackling sphere of energy appeared in front of Issei. It was small, but it grew to the size of a basketball quickly. Issei didn't hesitate to slam his fist into it. Dragon Shot. Burst Fire. Even though Issei didn't train in his long-range attacks often, that didn't mean he never trained or thought about creating new attacks. He'd always thought it would be cool if he had an attack that could attack multiple enemies at once. The idea had come from an anime he had watched called Dragon Go. One of the characters was able to create an attack that launched beams in a scattershot fire like a shotgun. Issei's attack did just that. Numerous beams of energy blasted from the sphere and struck the bridge, detonating with an incredible amount of force and creating gale winds that he could feel even from where he stood. A lot of anti-demon monsters were wiped from the map. Issei would have loved to cheer, but now wasn't the time for that. The kid was creating more of these shadow monsters. There has to be a limit to how much of those he can make. No power was invincible. Everything had a weakness. Naruto had taught him that, and he'd taken it to heart. A power like Annihilation Maker probably relied on the user's imagination and energy to create these monsters. That meant if he ran out of energy, he wouldn't be able to make any more. However, at that moment, it seemed like there was no end to them. Just as he was thinking that, a group of women burst out from within the shadow monsters' ranks and charged at them. All of them were wearing the same school uniforms, carrying spears and swords that flashed in the light, and moving fairly quickly for humans.
We'll handle you, Secure-UT. Ha! Issei suddenly felt invigorated. No woman can stand up to me. Breasts, liberate your words. Bilingual.
As Issei released the magic around the girls, a magical space with him at the center was deployed around him. It wasn't visible to others. Only he could see it. Come, breasts of the ladies, let me hear your thoughts. Crying erupted from inside of him as the breasts began speaking to him. The crying was, of course, Diedrich, but Issei put his partner's tears out of his mind. We're going to use a feint to mock him and then attack all at once. I'll attack from the right, I'll hit him straight on. Issei grinned as the breasts told him exactly what his enemies would do. He felt like giving off a diabolical laugh. These women would never be able to defeat him so long as he knew what they were doing. The women charged in and attacked, but Issei was already moving. He swerved around the spear of the girl attacking him from the front, placed his hand on her clothing, and then leapt back as the girl on his left swung her sword. This took him into the range of the last girl, but he ducked underneath her attack and placed his hands on her clothing as well. I am possible. How did he dodge us? Ha ha ha. Now taste the power of my ultimate technique. Let me see them titties, dress break. Issei activated his technique, and with a loud tearing sound, the clothes the girls were wearing was blown apart. The girls' breasts were completely exposed. This not only was a feast for the eyes, but the girls, so ashamed at being seen naked, were unable to battle because they were too embarrassed. HMPH. He guessed they really were just normal high school girls at heart. What a vulgar technique. I've never seen anything so despicable before, Kuno muttered. Ouch. That one had actually hurt a little, but Issei didn't have time to feel sorry for himself. Regardless of what anyone said, this was a legitimate technique. It also meant he didn't have to injure his opponents to win. Now, Asia, promote me to a knight, KK. Asia quickly changed Issei's promotion from bishop to knight, which he switched to because his long-range attacks had served their purpose. Now what he needed was speed. I'm going. Boosted gear. Whip. Issei launched himself into a sprint. He moved so fast the world around him became a blur. In less than a second, he was already in front of the line of antimatter monsters. And he swung the whip attached to his right arm. In most cases, one would expect a whip to strike the enemy and maybe send them stumbling backward, or wrapping around the enemy so they could be pulled off their feet. That wasn't what happened here. Issei's whip went straight through the monsters, cutting them apart like a hot knife through butter. It was so easy even he was shocked. However, he didn't have time to celebrate. More monsters were coming. A little ways off, Issei could see Naruto battling against 4 members of the Chaos Brigade. He seemed to be holding his own. However, Issei knew that was subjective. Naruto wasn't taking any damage, but it was also hard for him to damage his opponents. The 4 hero faction members were doing an excellent job of forcing him to switch targets, never letting the blonde man land a solid blow. Determined to take care of this monster problem, at least, Issei moved into the army of anti-demon monsters and began mowing them down. He stuck primarily with his whip. However, he also used Ascalon, the holy sword given to him by Michael. Spinning around, he slashed at the nearest monster, severing its head. He turned again. One monster had tried to sneak up behind him, but he ducked and attacked with his whip, cutting it down the middle. More and more monsters came. Issei cut them down in swaths. He could see Leonardo, the boy who was creating these monsters. Just a little more, and he would be able to. Almost before the thought entered his head, something screamed at him to run. Issei acted on instinct. Leaping back, he just barely avoided having his head split open by a sword. A man stood before him. Elegant and refined, the man bore a princely aura that didn't lose out to Kiba in the least. Like the other members of the Chaos Brigade, he was wearing a school uniform with some Chinese-style clothing added for good measure. His white hair was a bit messy and fell around a handsome face that made Issei hate him even more. "I am surprised by how competent you are." The man tilted his head a bit, as though Issei were a puzzle he was trying to solve. "Given the description of you by Valley, I had been expected someone incompetent but powerful. You seem to have more intelligence than I had been told you were." What kind of insulting introduction is that?" asked a thoroughly annoyed Issei. The man was holding a sword in each hand as he walked forward. "It is a pleasure to meet you for the first time, Gremory servants. My name is Siegfried. I am a descendant of the hero with the same name." While the man had a gentle-looking face, Issei wasn't fooled for even a second. Pretty boys like that were always the enemy. They were his natural-born nemesis. "I see you have Irina with you," Siegfried commented as he watched the battle between Irina and Zenobia. The two of them were really tearing apart their battleground. "I was once a former colleague of Irina's, a top-class warrior of the Catholic Church. They used to call me Demonic Emperor Sig because I could use holy and demonic swords." At first glance, Issei wondered what was going on. Hadn't Naruto been fighting this guy? It wasn't until he looked over that he could see Naruto was now contending with the other 3 members of the hero faction, plus Leonardo's monsters. It seemed they had decided to switch tactics to defeat him. Now they were using wave tactics. "I see. They want to overwhelm him with enemies. That would have been a sound plan, but now that he was so thoroughly outnumbered, Naruto was matching their tactics by spamming shadow clones. It was like a free-for-all brawl over there. I don't particularly care who you are." Issei cracked his knuckles. "If you're gonna get in my way, then I'm gonna move out of the way." Issei was just about to launch himself at the man, when Kiba suddenly stepped in front of him. "Hey, Kiba. What gives? Sorry, eyes, but if you don't mind, I would like to be the one who takes Siegfried on." "That's good," Siegfried murmured as he held up his sword and pointed it at Kiba. A strange chill traveled down Issei's spine as he looked at the demonic blade. "You're the one I want to fight. Let's hope you don't regret it." Before the battle between these two could actually get started, Siegfried was suddenly launched into the air. Behind the man was Naruto. No, it was probably a Naruto clone. Sometime during the battle, Naruto had spammed what looked to be over 100 clones. They were fighting against the anti-demon monsters. A lot of them were getting dispelled by the monsters, but Naruto would just spam more clones while he continued to battle Jean, Heracles, and Georg. The clone gave Issei a grin before it went back to fighting the shadow monsters. It was dispelled moments later when a blast of light slammed into it.
Several loud explosions drew their attention to the battle between Azazel and Cao Cao. The fallen angel was trying to stay mostly at range and attacking by hurtling spears of light. It didn't look like he was holding back either. Each spear exploded to create a colossal impact, causing the earth to rumble and the world to shake. Issei was actually worried his attacks would disrupt this place. The ground where their battle was taking place had become a merciless wasteland, a place filled with fire and brimstone. A lot of the water from the river had evaporated and hissed into steam, and the ground underneath it looked red-hot, like boiling magma. It was no longer a place of tranquility. Now it was a place of destruction.
Almost like some kind of cue had told them to, Azazel and Cao Cao landed on the bridge between the Gremory group and the hero faction. Likewise, Naruto had somehow managed to retreat and was now standing alongside Issei and the others. He didn't look very injured. He had a few scrapes and bruises, and his left arm was bleeding, but Heracles, Jean, and Georg were in much worse shape. Oh, Siegfried had also come back. He was holding his butt as though it had just been violated. Azazel and Cao Cao were in much worse shape than Naruto, with cuts, bruises, and torn clothes all over the place. If Issei was being honest, he was surprised Cao Cao looked so uninjured. He hadn't expected a human to do so well against a fallen angel. Cao Cao stared at them as he cracked his neck and frowned.
I suppose it's true. You guys really are a great team of devil servants. I see now why you are so well known amongst the new generation of devils. While I was expecting a good fight because Naruto was here, I hadn't known what to expect from the rest of you. He paused and looked at Issei. You, especially, Sekiryuti. Despite your lack of natural talent or demonic powers, you were able to hold yourself up to us quite well.
Thank you, Issei said, though it sounded more like a question.
Unlike the old Mao and that fool Loki, we don't intend to underestimate you. Cao Cao pointed his spear at them. We believe that in the future, you guys will become the most dangerous threat we face. If we eliminate you now, we not only rid ourselves of a serious obstacle, but we should also gain some useful data.
Issei frowned as he realized how different these guys were from the arrogant members of the old Mao faction. They weren't underestimating him and his comrades. Was it because they were human? Issei narrowed his eyes in frustration. He had no idea how to fight opponents like this. I've got a question for you, Azazel said suddenly. What motivates the hero faction? Why are you doing all this? Smiling through his narrowed eyes, Cao Cao said, Governor of the Fallen Angels, you might find this surprising, but our reasons for everything we do is incredibly simple. We just want to know the limits of a human and challenge that. We want to see how far we can go, and we want to prove to everyone that we'll win no matter who we face. Angels, devils, dragons, fallen angels, every other race will eventually fall against us. Azazel frowned at the young man. Do you really think it will be that easy? I don't think it will be easy at all. Cao Cao shrugged. I know the road ahead is difficult, but Slurrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr As one, everyone turned to look at Naruto who, much to their shock, was eating instant ramen. Issei had no idea when his sensei had pulled out that ramen, or when he had time to cook it. No wait. Just why was Naruto eating ramen in the first place? As if just now realizing that everyone had turned their attention to him, Naruto looked up, a noodle hanging from his mouth. He slurped up the noodle. "Why did you two stop with your cliched banter?" he asked, tilting his head. "Naruto, what are you doing?" asked Azazel. "Eating ramen." "Yes, I can see that. What I meant was why are you eating in the middle of a battle?" Because I was hungry." Naruto shrugged as he stirred the cup noodles with a pair of chopsticks. "Also, it was getting boring listening to you two talk. I figured while you guys were doing your thing, I would use this opportunity to put something delicious in my belly." Azazel sighed, and even the hero faction members seemed off kilter. Issei and the others had grown fairly used to Naruto doing weird things that made no sense, so they didn't react like the others, but even they found it a bit unusual to see him eating ramen in the middle of a battle. Before anyone could give voice to their thoughts, a magic circle appeared on the ground between their two forces. Issei didn't recognize the crest. However, as Naruto looked up, his eyes sparkling.
"Oh, this magic circle is..." Someone appeared from within the magic circle just then. It was an extremely cute girl dressed in a school uniform. Her blonde hair only reached to about her shoulders, but it was curled at the ends, making Issei think her hair was longer unstyled. She wore a khaki-colored jacket over a white shirt with a tie. There were blue and khaki checkers along the hem and sleeves. Her skirt was pink, and it was short enough that he could see most of her long legs.
While seeing a cute girl in a school uniform wasn't odd, the girl had thrown a dark blue cloak over the whole attire. Furthermore, she was wearing a large witch's hat. Given all that and how she had appeared within that circle, it was safe to assume she was a mage. Actually, now that he was looking at her, Issei thought she looked familiar. The girl turned toward the group of devils and gave a radiant smile as she waved. "Naruto, it's good to see you again, Fei-chan," Naruto grinned as he waved back. "How are you?" "I'm doing good. Life's been a bit boring since you went back home, but Valley has been keeping everyone busy." "Valley?" Issei was confused. "What does Valley have to do with this?" "Don't you know?" Naruto asked. "That's Lefei Pendragon. She's a member of Team Valley and the younger sister of Arthur." Issei was shocked. He actually remembered a bit about Arthur, but he had no idea that boy had such a cute little sister. "Lefei?" Azazel scratched his chin. "Do you mean like Morgana Le Fay? I remember hearing that Morgana and the Hero King, Arthur Pendragon, were related by blood, but..." As the conversation continued, Cao Cao and the other Hero Faction members appeared shocked over Le Fay's sudden appearance. It seemed they hadn't expected this either. That made Issei wonder what a member of Valley's team was doing there. Also, why did Naruto seem so close to her? "What is going on here?" asked Cao Cao. "What does Valley want now?" "Oh, yes." As if she had just now remembered what she was here for, Le Fay spun around to face Cao Cao. She was all smiles. "I came here to bring a message from Valley-sama. He says, I thought I told you not to disturb B. That's the message, but oh, you also need to be punished for trying to put us under surveillance." Following Le Fay's announcement, which came complete with an adorable smile, the ground shook. Issei nearly fell onto his butt. He grabbed Asia to keep her from falling when she squeaked. About a meter to his left, Naruto was holding Kuno to keep her from falling too. Crack. A loud noise echoed all around them as the ground was split open like an egg being cracked. Issei gawked as something huge emerged from the ground. First came a hand. It was a massive hand made of stone, and it was easily 4 times the size of Issei's head. After the hand, an arm emerged, followed by another hand, then a head, a torso, and then legs and feet. When the massive thing had fully emerged, all Issei could do was stare in shock. That thing was over 10 meters tall. "It's a Gogmagog," Azazel shouted in surprise. "That's right," Le Fay answered. "This is one of the members of our team, Gogs-kun." While Issei was shocked to hear such a cute name being given to a giant stone monster, something else about this situation was bothering him. "Sensei, that giant rock is moving. It's called a Gogmagog," Naruto answered. It seemed he was finished with his ramen. He threw the empty cup away. "It's a type of golem found within the dimensional gap. It's a type of mass-produced weapon of destruction, though I don't know much else about them. Supposedly, all of them are floating around in a state of suspended animation. However, Fei-chan found this one and got it moving again." "So this is something from the dimensional gap?" asked Issei, still in shock. "Yup. This is fascinating," Azazel said, his eyes shining like a child's. "I've heard of Gogmagogs, of course, but this is my first time seeing one in person. To find that one of them has begun moving after so long, I can barely contain my excitement." After a moment, Azazel seemed to realize where he was and recovered his wits. He actually still looked like he had many questions. Were the circumstances different, Issei was sure the man would have picked Le Fay's brain. "I'd heard that Valley was checking out the dimensional gap." The fallen angel narrowed his eyes. "I guess that means he wasn't just there for Great Red." "That's right." Le Fay nodded several times. "Valley-sama was the one who detected Gogs-kun. Office-sama once told us she had discovered a giant that could move in the dimensional gap, so we went to search for it. That reminds me, I don't even know who is on Valley's team. Currently, there's Valley-sama, Biku-sama, Arthur, Kuroka-san, Fenrir-chan, Gogs-kun, and me." Le Fay was all too happy to answer. She didn't even seem to care that she was standing in the middle of a battlefield. "That makes 7 of us in total." 7 was such a small number, but Issei didn't let that fool him.
Valley was a tough customer. That meant whoever was on his team must have been monsters as well. I'm a bit confused, Issei admitted. Doesn't Great Red live in the dimensional gap? Why would it have this kind of giant?
The dimensional gap is a big place, Azazel said. And it's not like Great Red really cares about whether there's anyone else in there or not. He just wants to fly around in the dimensional gap and doesn't actually cause trouble for anyone. Actually, Great Red is a special existence so powerful none of the other factions have placed him in their rankings. As Azazel finished speaking, the golem raised its giant fist at the hero faction. Issei only had a moment to be surprised as the golem smashed apart the Togetsukiyo bridge. The bridge shattered. Large chunks of wood flew into the sky, scattering all over the now ruined riverbed, along with a number of those shadow monsters. The hero faction members appeared to be unharmed. They were able to escape the bridge's destruction in time. Cao Cao looked at the destruction caused by Gogs-kun, and then he turned back to Le Fei. I see Valley learned that we were spying on him. That's unfortunate. I'd been hoping to spy a little while longer, but oh well. He studied everyone again, including Le Fei. It looks like there are too many factors interfering, so we'll let things go here. While he was speaking, a young man with a feathered cape produced a thick mist from his hand. The mist spread across the area. It wasn't long before Cao Cao and his cohorts vanished completely. However, just because they could no longer see him didn't mean they couldn't hear him. It was fun, Governor General. We'll have to do this again sometime. Tonight, we will be using Kyoto's ley lines and the Kyuubi leader to turn Nijo Castle into a massive battery for our experiment. I hope you'll all come to watch.
Bye-bye, Cao Cao. It's Cao Cao. Get it right.
Naruto's words had completely ruined Cao Cao's attempt at being cool, but there was nothing he could do by that point. The mist had thickened, it started beneath their feet, spread to their chests, and soon covered their faces. Issei gagged on reflex but nothing happened. The mist didn't invade their bodies or anything, and when it cleared, they were standing on the streets next to the Togetsukiyo bridge. Not only that but the other tourists were crossing the bridge as if nothing had happened. Everyone, quick, put away your weapons. Before anyone could grow suspicious of them, Issei and the others dismissed their weapons. The armor that had been covering Issei disappeared, as did Kiba's sword berth and the other weapons they were wielding. Eyes? What's wrong? You're making a really scary face. Matsuda said, staring at his face. However, he soon realized something. All of you are making a scary face. It's nothing, Issei tried to reassure his friend that nothing was wrong. He gave a long exhale and tried to put away his frown. The other members who'd gone into battle with him also wore some really deadly expressions. Only Naruto, the man who had basically taken charge and fought 4 members of the hero faction on his own, did not look serious. Man, I am so hungry. But didn't you just eat? Asked Motohama. Not only did he just eat, but he had eaten ramen during the battle. Issei didn't say that, though. I always have room in my stomach for more food, Naruto answered. Le Fei was gone, as was the giant, Gogs-kun. Issei didn't know if they had disappeared alongside the hero faction, but he put the thought out of his mind as Irina came walking down from a little ways off. She'd been fighting against Xenovia, and her battle had taken them away from the bridge. Are you okay, Irinachi? Asked Kiryu. The reason she asked that was probably because Irina was limping, but it might also have been due to her frown. She did not look pleased. If anything, she looked depressed. However, Irina swallowed whatever she was feeling and gave the other girl her best smile. Oh, yeah. I'm fine. I just tripped. It was a lame excuse, but Kiryu accepted the explanation with a shrug. Mother, those people plan on using Mother, why? At those words, Issei glanced at Kuno, who trembled as she looked abjectly at the ground. Her posture reminded him of how she'd looked the other day. Yet before she could get too depressed, Naruto placed a hand on her head and began stroking her hair. His sensei had a way with kids, so he let him take care of it. He looked back at the bridge and thought about Cao Cao's attack, his announcement about the experiment at Nijo Castle, and what they were going to do about it. Issei clenched his hands into fists. Devil Ninja. It's been quite the day, huh? Asked Kiba. Yeah, a lot more happened than I expected. It was late evening. A glance outside revealed the setting sun was beginning its crawl below the horizon, and the rays of light were casting multicolored hues across the sky. After the battle on the bridge, Naruto, Kiba, Issei, Asia, Irina, and the others had continued their tour as if nothing was wrong. The two groups had split up after a while since they were going to different locations. Issei and his group headed to Nijo Castle. Naruto's group had already been there, so they traveled elsewhere. Upon returning to the hotel, the groups had eaten dinner, taken a bath, and now the Naruto and Kiba were messing around with the flat-screen TV. Kiba had taken several pictures and wanted to view the photos. On a side note, Roswise had not been in his room when they arrived. He assumed she'd gone to her own room upon waking up. "I had no idea you were a photographer," Naruto murmured as Kiba connected the flat-screen TV to his camera. "I'm not," Kiba answered. "I just thought it would be fun to memorialize the trip with some photos."
Makes sense. Tomorrow would be the last day of their trip, which would consist of mostly buying souvenirs and such. Naruto almost sighed. The trip hadn't lasted very long at all. There was still a lot to see, but he understood they couldn't afford to stay for too long. This was a school trip, after all.
"I'll come here with Rias and the others on an actual vacation next time." "Irina hasn't shown up yet," Kiba muttered. Naruto shrugged. "She might be with Eyes. She does have a crush on him." "You think so? I'm not so sure about that." Naruto pretended not to hear Kiba's muttered last sentence, but he understood what the blonde swordsman was talking about. There were times when it seemed like Irina might have feelings for him instead of Issei. Part of the reason he'd asked Irina if she loved Issei was because he wanted to know if there was anything between them, him and Irina. If there was, he would have asked her to become his, but it seemed there were lingering feelings for Issei, and Naruto did not want to interfere in her love life if that was the case. Someone knocked on the door as these thoughts flashed through his mind. Curious to know who would come by at this hour, and wondering if it might be Irina, he answered the door.
Irina, it was not. "You're Mimori-san, right?" The girl standing at the other end was fairly plain. She was cute, certainly, but her cuteness was the kind that could be found anywhere. Brown hair tied into a ponytail matched her brown eyes. She had light skin and a modest figure. Adorning her body was a basic white kimono that looked like a bathrobe.
"Why yes." Mimori blushed a bit, though that was likely because Kiba had peeked over to look at her. "Is there something we can help you with?" asked Naruto. I was just wondering if you could talk to Irina," Mimori said. "She's been holed up in our room since dinner. All of us have asked her if something is wrong, but she just smiles and tells us not to worry." He sighed and rubbed his forehead. "Yeah, having someone say that when they look depressed only makes people worry more. I wonder what makes people think telling someone not to worry would actually have the effect of making others not worry." Mimori looked confused by his words, but Naruto waved her off with a smile. "I'll talk to her for you." Thank you." Kiba told Naruto he'd get everything set up for the picture viewing and wait for him to return. "Be sure to bring Irina. I'm sure getting to see all the pictures we took would help her out. Just leave it to me." Naruto followed Mimori to the room she shared with Irina. She didn't bother knocking on the door. She gave Naruto the keycard that would let him enter and told him she was going to visit her friend's room before leaving. He watched her go, sighed, and then unlocked the door and entered the room. He found Irina sitting on her bed, her knees drawn up to her chest and her face buried between them. She was wearing the same white kimono as Mimori. She must have at least taken a bath then. Unlike with Mimori, the kimono seemed a bit small around her chest. Or maybe it was because her knees were pushing against her breasts that caused them to bulge out the way they were. The lower half was folded slightly, allowing him to glimpse her lean legs. She was barefoot, and her toes were clenching and unclenching the bedsheet. Irina didn't respond to his entrance. Perhaps she assumed he was Mimori coming to check up on her. Naruto closed the door behind him and wandered further into the room, sitting down on Irina's bed. Finally, at the shifting of her bed, Irina looked up.
"Naruto, what are you doing here? Mimori was worried about you. She asked me to talk to you."
Irina sighed. "I told her not to worry. You know that telling someone not to worry when you clearly look like someone just killed your pet hamster only makes them worry more, right?"
That was an oddly specific description. Rias has been on a Hamtaro binge recently. His words elicited a small chuckle from Irina but not much else. Naruto took a deep breath. "This is about Xenovia, isn't it?"
"Why yes," Irina admitted with a sigh. "Will you tell me about it?" Naruto asked. She said nothing for several seconds, but eventually, her feet slid across the bed, legs straightening as she leaned back against the headboard. as though gravity were pulling them down. Her feet canted inward, toward each other, and she began hooking her toes together, similar to how someone twiddled their thumbs when nervous. Even though she tilted her head to look at the ceiling, her eyes were far away. She was clearly not looking at anything he could see.
When Zenobia and I fought, she told me she felt like the church had betrayed her and that's why she left and became a member of the Chaos Brigade. To be honest, when I heard how she felt, I couldn't really blame her. A part of me felt betrayed as well, but I ultimately decided to simply switch my devotion from God to Michael. Zenobia told me she couldn't do that after being lied to.
Naruto nodded as he listened to Irina. I'm guessing you tried to reason with her. Yes, I did. Irina released an even bigger sigh than before. This one seemed to be filled with all the disappointment she felt at herself. But it didn't work. Zenobia said she could never go back to being a member of the church after what happened, that she could never trust them again. I couldn't even say anything in their defense. A
strange impulse overcame Naruto as tears leaked from Irina's eyes and down her pale cheeks. He knew it came from his own selfish desires, so he ignored the urge he felt to hug Irina. It wouldn't be right. Instead, he found a box of tissues and present them to her so she could wipe her face and blow her nose. She accepted them with a smile and did just that.
While it may be impossible for Zenobia to join the church, have you considered trying to convince her to become a devil? What? Irina looked up from her tissue, currently covered in snot. Naruto took the tissue from her, wadded it up, and tossed it into the trash can several meters away. He offered another tissue. Zenobia is lost because her faith was destroyed, and she didn't have the devotion that you do, so once her faith was gone, she felt she couldn't return to the church's fold. However, angels and devils have now allied with each other. It shouldn't be a big deal if she becomes a devil instead of an angel, right? I'm sure Rias would be willing to reincarnate her, and then she can move in with us. It was a bit of a stretch, but Naruto's logic was that since angels and devils were now allies, it wouldn't matter which faction she joined. She could become a devil and still be Irina's ally and friend.
Irina bit her lip. A war took place within her, visible through the conflicted look in her eyes. After a few seconds, however, she nodded. That could work. After everything I've seen and all we've been through, I realize now that devils aren't evil beings who need to be punished. A dejected expression crossed her face. But how would I convince Zenobia to become a devil?
The same way I've convinced all my friends to become my friends. Naruto grinned as he clenched his fist and held it up. You beat the crap out of her until she agrees. Irina stared at Naruto who, upon realizing his enthusiastic reply hadn't gotten through, slowly lowered his hand. Is that not a good idea? Well, you did suggest beating up one of my best friends. Naruto shrugged. From everything I've seen, Zenobia is the kind of person who responds to actions better than words. In that case, you need to show her through your actions that you aren't going to let her run off on her own. The next time you two fight, I want you to defeat her with everything you have. Fight her with all your strength, and when she lies defeated and unable to argue with you, convince her to become a devil. Despite Naruto speaking with complete confidence, Irina still looked unsure. Do you really think that will work? There's always a chance that it won't. Naruto shrugged. But think about this. If you do nothing, then nothing will happen. There's nothing worse than inaction.
Yes, I guess you're right. After thinking about everything he had said for a moment, Irina finally nodded, and her face broke out into a smile. Thank you, Naruto. I feel a lot better now.
Hey, I'm always here when you need me. His words caused Irina to blush, but Naruto pretended not to notice as he stood up and held out his hand. Anyway, Kiba wants to show off the pictures he took during our tour. Why don't you come back to our room and watch them with us? Irina stared at his hand for a little bit, but then she slowly reached out and placed her hand in his. Okay, she said with an adorable blush, Devil Ninja. Naruto brought Irina back to his and Kiba's room, where they enjoyed looking at all the photos that had been taken. There were more than Naruto expected. Kiba must have been taking them when he wasn't looking. Had this been a normal school trip, Naruto imagined they would have gone to bed after that, but that wasn't what happened. He, Kiba, and Irina left the room and headed to Issei's room. Asia, Azazel, Seraphal, Roswise, and the Sea-Tree servants were already inside. They were going to discuss tonight's mission to rescue Yasaka from the hero faction. Issei's room was tiny. It wasn't bigger than 8 tatami mats or so. This forced everyone to stand. Roswise, How are you feeling? Asked Naruto as he looked at the woman. Her face was a tad pale. I'm fine. She smiled at him. I took a potion to recover after waking up. You also helped me a lot. Thank you for taking care of me. You're welcome. Naruto couldn't help but notice how adorable Roswise looked when she was blushing. However, for whatever reason, Irina was looking at him with a disapproving glare. Part of him wondered if she was jealous. He didn't say anything, though. Azazel glanced at everyone, and after making sure they were all paying attention, he spread a map of Kyoto on the floor in the center of the room and began. You all know what's going on, so I'll start by explaining our battle plan.
He marked several places on the map with a marker. The areas centered around Niju Castle and Kyoto Station are now on high alert. All devils and fallen angels stationed in Kyoto have been mobilized to search for any suspicious characters. The Kyoto yokai are also providing us with assistance. Although we haven't been able to confirm the movements of the hero faction, we have successfully detected an ominous presence with Niju Castle at its center.
That would explain why Cao Cao told us about his plan, Naruto said. He probably knew he wouldn't be able to hide it. That was my thought too, Azazel admitted. What did you mean by an ominous presence? Asked Kiba. Since ancient times, Kyoto has been a city constructed using the principles of yin-yang and feng shui. In many ways, the city is like a large-scale magic circle. As a result, there are many areas within Kyoto that contain a lot of power like the Seimei Shrine's Seimei Well, Suzumushi Temple's Kofuku Jizo, Fushimi Inari's Pine Tree Hizamatsu-san, and numerous other locations. There are too many to count. However, that flow of power is becoming more turbulent by the second, and all of it is gathering at Nijo Castle. A lot of what Azazel was saying went over Naruto's head. He didn't understand the intricacies of yin-yang or feng shui, but he still got the gist of what Azazel was telling them. What will happen if all that power gathers at Nijo Castle? Asked Saji. We don't know, but I can bet you anything it won't be good. Azazel stood up and put the marker away. Since the hero faction plans on using the Kyuubi leader who controls the ley lines of this city to carry out some kind of experiment, I can only assume that whatever they plan on doing, it will be harmful to the inhabitants of this city. Nothing good ever comes from messing with the natural flow of energy like this.
Even if they didn't necessarily understand what Azazel meant, or what would happen if they did nothing, everyone nodded. The fallen angel former governor looked at them all. His face was quite serious. This was no longer the easygoing man who drank during the day and slept with women at night. Naruto realized, in this moment, why Azazel had been the leader of the Gregorian till resigning from his post.
Now, let's begin with the plan. The Sea Tree Peerage is going to be on guard in the area around Kyoto Station. Guarding this hotel will also be your job. The hotel itself already has a barrier around it in the event that something unexpected happens, but that won't protect it if the hero faction decides to attack. That's why, if anyone suspicious approaches, it will be your job to handle them. We understand, the Sea Tree Peerage replied in unison. Next, I will be explaining what the Gremory Peerage plus Irina will be doing. He glanced at them, and this time, his smile turned apologetic. I'm sorry for putting you all on the spot like this after everything that's happened, but you guys are going to be the assault squad.
Your job will be to advance toward Niju Castle. We have no idea how many enemies you will have to face or what their powers will be. This is going to be a dangerous gamble. That said, your first priority is rescuing Yusaka. Once you succeed, you can pull out. Cao Cao said they were using Yusaka for an experiment, but there is a chance this was just a bluff to make you guys show up. It could be that the reason he was so willing to tell us his plan is because he wants you to show up.
Naruto had also considered the possibility that this was a trap. In fact, he was almost 100% certain Cao Cao had told them about what they were doing to lure their group into a trap, and then take them out. At the very least, he knew that Cao Cao wanted him gone. He'd already said it himself. Naruto was a threat. Do we even have enough power to launch an attack? Asked Issei. I mean, it's going to be myself, Kiba, Naruto, Irina, Roswise, and Asia against who knows how many enemies. You bring up a good point, but you don't need to worry about that. Azazel assured Issei. I have already enlisted the help of some anti-terrorist experts. They've been a great help in battling against the Chaos Brigade so far. With them at our side, the chances of success will raise quite a bit. Reinforcements? Kiba blinked several times. Who will be helping us? Azazel gave him a mysterious smile. Just think of them as exceptionally powerful beings for now. While the fallen angel teacher looked quite pleased with himself, Naruto could not help but frown. Years ago, he would not have really cared about not being told everything, but those days were long gone. He understood now that information was a key component to attaining victory. Not knowing who his allies were meant he wouldn't know how much he could trust them. Saying that, Naruto was pretty confident they wouldn't need help from whoever Azazel had called in. Even weakened as he was, Naruto had confidence in his power. Should the worst come to pass, Naruto would use his new jutsu, though it would require the help of Issei and the others to protect him while he activated it. That said, once activated, he highly doubted anyone less than Office would be able to stop him. I would rather we not use a jutsu that is still in the experimental phase. So would I, but we might not have a choice. Well, you have always been reckless, so this is all par for the course.
Naruto smiled at Kurama's backhand acceptance of his decision. The fox might complain about how his jutsu was still experimental, but he knew the great being inside of him wanted nothing more than to stretch his limbs.
I do have a bit of bad news, Azazel said, interrupting Naruto from his thoughts. We were only able to acquire 3 vials worth of Phoenix Tears. What? Saji cried out with wide eyes. Only 3 vials worth? That's not enough. Our enemies are the Chaos Brigade. I'm aware of who our enemies are. Azazel's reply was mild, as if he had been expecting someone to react like this. However, due to the Chaos Brigade's terrorist activities all over the world, Phoenix Tears are currently in great demand. The numerous strongholds of various factions are low on supplies, thus requiring a greater need for powerful cure-all potions like Phoenix Tears. The Phoenix family has been incredibly busy producing them. What was originally a valuable commodity has since become so precious that the devils have banned the use of Phoenix Tears during raiding games so they can be used to help fight the Chaos Brigade. A lot of the information Azazel was telling them was stuff that Naruto already knew a little about, but he had been unaware as to how serious the situation had become. Because Rias was still considered an immature devil, she and her peerage were not allowed on the front lines. This meant they lacked a lot of the information that older, more experienced devils like Sirzex, Seraphal, and Beelzebub possessed. Everything was on a need-to-know basis, Azazel continued. This is a secret known only to a few, but right now the various factions have banded together and redoubled their efforts to find users of Twilight Healing. Even though it's a rare sacred gear, it's not unique. Our investigations have discovered there are several others aside from Asia who have it. Finding them will also give us a great advantage over the Chaos Brigade, since it will prevent them from being able to use their powers. The man paused, as though debating something, and then continued. The current Beelzebub has also been carrying out some personal research on new ways to heal people. That's all I can really say on that. The Grigori is also researching how to create recovery-type artificial sacred gears. In fact, Asia has been secretly helping us with our research. Thanks to her, we've already obtained a lot of promising data. While Naruto looked at Asia in surprise, Issei was puffing out his chest in pride, as if he was the one who had been helping them out. He assumed that meant Issei must have known what Asia was doing. Did Rias know as well? Probably. It wouldn't be like her to let one of her precious family members do something without her knowledge. Anyway, that's our situation, Azazel said into the silence. These tiers will be divided. 2 vials will go to the Gremory team since they are the main offensive, and the other one will go to the Sea-Tree team. Please only use them in emergencies. Everyone voiced that they understood. Naruto didn't think he would have any use for Phoenix Tears. On the off chance he did need them, he had the ones Revel had given him, which he kept in the necklace around his neck, but he was loath to use them. These tears are her way of confessing her feelings.
Now that everything else is out of the way, there is one addendum I would like to add. Azazel looked at Saji. You'll be joining the Gremory team.
I will? Saji pointed to himself with a flummoxed look on his face, but it didn't stay for long. Because of the Dragon King, right? Yes. Nodding, Azazel explained his decision. I know you've been training hard and become able to enter a dragon-like state recently. That will be very useful in combating the Chaos Brigade. Furthermore, the black flames you produce conceal the movements of your enemies and absorb their power at the same time. It's not a skill that we can afford to squander. Well, I mean, I don't mind, but Saji looked a bit out of sorts, or perhaps reluctant. I mean, whenever I use Vitra promotion, I usually lose consciousness and go berserk once I enter it. That's not a problem, Azazel said. We've done some research and concluded that eyes will be able to help you regain control of yourself. I can? Issei asked. You can. Nodding, Azazel told them about his theory. The state Saji enters is similar to the Juggernaut Drive, a berserk-like state of those who wield the two heavenly dragons. In order to come out of that state, someone has to use a set of powerful words infused with their intent. As the wielder of the heavenly dragon, Diedrich, you're probably the only one strong enough to properly control Vitra using those words. But what words do I say? Asked Issei. It doesn't matter. So long as they resonate with you and Saji, they will work.
That seemed like an awfully flimsy approach to Naruto, but he didn't say anything. It wasn't like he hadn't done stuff that wasn't stupid and reckless.
Irina raised her hand. Have the other factions been informed? At her words, everyone gazed at Azazel. Given the nature of this mission, it was pretty important that other factions know what was happening. Of course they have,